2,500 years ago, there was no Instagram, no breaking news, no endless stream of notifications. Yet the human heart was already tired. People lay awake at night with thoughts that wouldn't stop. They worried about their families, their future, their reputation. The scenery has changed, but the movie is the same. And if you're honest, you know this. Your brain doesn't need much help to create chaos. It's already a specialist. You've probably tried the modern solutions. Think positive. Manifest. Just let go. Maybe you even downloaded 3 meditation apps you don't open anymore. For a few days, something seems to work. Then one bad message, one unexpected bill, one memory you didn't ask for. And suddenly, your chest is tight again. Your mind is racing, and you're wondering, what's wrong with me? Here's the first counterintuitive truth of this journey. There is nothing wrong with you. There is something misunderstood about your mind. This video is not about turning you into a perfectly calm monk who never feels anger, never feels fear, never feels doubt. That's fantasy. And fantasy is one of the things keeping you stuck. What these 53 Buddhist teachings offer is far more interesting. A way to suffer less without needing a different life, a different past, or a different personality. You don't need to become someone else. You need to finally understand the someone you already are. Think of your mind like a house you've been living in with the lights off. You keep tripping over the same furniture, anxiety, overthinking, self-criticism, and you assume the house is badly built. Buddha's approach is simple and ruthless. Don't destroy the house. Turn on the light. See where the furniture really is. Each teaching we're going to explore together is like a small lamp in a different room. Attention, emotion, desire, relationships, work, even death. Here's the paradox. The moment you stop trying obsessively to get rid of your thoughts and feelings, they start losing power. Modern self-help wants you to control, fix, optimize. Buddhism invites you to observe, understand, and gently redirect. It's less like fighting a wild animal and more like learning to train it. By the way, that animal isn't your enemy. It's your mind trying to protect you with outdated strategies. As you listen, you may recognize yourself in these stories. A woman stuck in traffic who wakes up from her rage. A man who discovers that one honest sentence heals more than 1,000 fake smiles. Someone who realizes their phone isn't the problem. Their relationship to discomfort is. You might even catch your own patterns in real time. The way you grab your screen when loneliness hits. The way you rehearse arguments that never happen. This is not a religious sermon asking for your blind faith. Buddha himself said, "Don't believe anything just because it's old, famous, or written in a book. Test it. Try it in your real Tuesday afternoon when nobody's watching. If a teaching helps you suffer less, keep it. If it doesn't, let it go." That's our deal here. No dogma, just practical psychology before psychology had a name. And there is a quick win for you, even in the first minutes. As you absorb these teachings, you'll notice something subtle. You're not just trapped inside your experience anymore, you're also watching it. That small shift from "I am my anxiety" to "I'm noticing my anxiety" is the doorway to freedom. The more time you spend in that doorway, the less your old patterns can run the show without your permission. So if your mind has been loud, if your body has been tense, if you're tired of feeling like life is happening to you instead of through you, stay with me. Over the next 70 minutes, we're going to walk step by step through these 53 teachings like a journey, from chaos to clarity, from autopilot to awareness, from surviving the day to actually inhabiting your life. Take a breath. You don't have to fix anything right now. Just listen. The path is already under your feet. You're about to learn how to walk it differently. There's a moment in many people's lives when they realize they've been living on demo mode. Days pass, but almost nothing is remembered. They wake up, grab the phone, scroll, rush, work, scroll again, sleep. The body is present, but the mind is somewhere else, replaying old scenes or rehearsing future disasters. A whole life can disappear inside this fog. The Buddha called this sleep, not of the body, but of awareness itself. He used a simple distinction. The fool sleeps as if already dead. The master stays awake and lives forever. That sounds poetic, but it's actually brutally practical. Sleeping here doesn't mean being lazy. It means moving through the day without really noticing anything. It's the person who crosses an entire city and can't remember the walk. It's the parent who hears their child speak but doesn't listen. It's the worker who spends 10 years in a job, yet feels like it all blurred into one long sequay. It's a tanambuidao gray day. Imagine someone in traffic, stuck behind a long line of cars. Every red light feels like an insult. Every slow driver is a personal attack. Their jaw tightens, the shoulders rise, the mind writes angry monologues. One morning, though, something different happens. Instead of feeding the anger, they watch it rise. They notice the heartbeat, the heat in the face, the story forming. For the first time, they aren't inside the anger. They're seeing it. That tiny shift is the birth of an attentive mind. Nothing outside changed. The traffic didn't magically disappear. No spiritual soundtrack started playing. The only difference is that awareness woke up for a moment, and when awareness wakes up, even for a few seconds, reality becomes less heavy. The person still feels frustration, but now they see it as a passing weather pattern, not as their entire identity. In that space, freedom quietly appears. Autopilot feels safe because it's familiar. It's like driving the same road every day. The hands know the turns, the eyes barely need to look. But the price of this safety is presence. People get home and realize they don't remember the journey. That's cute when it's just a commute. It's tragic when it's a decade. An attentive mind is the opposite. It doesn't change the road. It changes how fully the person travels it. The funny thing is, nobody chooses autopilot consciously. Nobody wakes up and says, "Today, I want to miss my own life." It happens slowly, almost kindly. A little more distraction here, one more notification there, a bit more stress, and one more, "I'll pay attention later." Then, one day, the person looks back and feels like someone pressed fast forward on their own existence. The wise mentor doesn't judge this. He simply says, "Good. You woke up enough to notice." That's the first sign of life. Attention is like a muscle. If it's not trained, it gets weak. People often believe they're bad at focusing, as if it were a fixed trait written in stone. But if someone hasn't trained their body in years, they don't call themselves permanently weak. They understand they're simply untrained. The mind is no different. A few minutes a day of intentional noticing is like a basic workout for awareness. Small, consistent, surprisingly powerful over time. Practical example. When drinking a cup of coffee or tea, most people barely taste it. They're on their phone, half reading, half thinking, half worrying. 3 halves, 0 presence. Try this instead. Once a day, pick one sip and give it full attention. Notice the warmth, the smell, the texture, the tiny muscles in the hand holding the cup. It's not about becoming a tea monk. It's about proving to yourself that you can be fully here, even for 5 seconds. The mentor would say this: if you can give full attention to one sip, you can give full attention to a conversation, to a walk, to your own thoughts. People often jump to big, mystical practices, but they ignore these small, humble doorways. Presence doesn't arrive with fireworks. It begins quietly, in the most ordinary things, in the way someone unlocks a door, in the way they feel the water in the shower, in the way they actually look at their own hands. There's another side to autopilot that's more dangerous. It hides pain. When someone is constantly busy, constantly scrolling, constantly distracted, it's rarely random. Often, there's something they don't want to feel. A loss, a disappointment, a fear. Staying busy and productive becomes a socially accepted way to stay asleep. The attentive mind doesn't destroy this person's life. It asks the scary question: what are you running from inside your own chest? Facing that question isn't comfortable. That's why many people prefer a life full of noise. But discomfort and danger are not the same thing. The wise one knows that when a feeling is finally seen, it often loses half of its power. It's like turning on the light in a dark room. The monster in the corner was a coat on a chair. Attention illuminates, not to make feelings vanish, but to make them honest, clear, workable. You can't heal what you refuse to look at. For those who like structure, there are simple tools to train this attention. A basic mindfulness app, a short guided meditation on YouTube, books like The Miracle of Mindfulness by Thich Nhat Hanh, or Wherever You Go, There You Are by Jon Kabat-Zinn. None of these are magic, but they offer something precious, a daily reminder to pause, to notice, to come back. They are like alarm clocks for the soul, gently saying, "Wake up, your life is happening now." Another practical exercise is what some people call micro check-ins. A person sets 3 alarms on their phone: morning, afternoon, and evening. When the alarm rings, instead of grabbing the phone and diving into apps, they stop for 10 seconds. They ask themselves, where is my mind right now? Past? Future? Somewhere completely random? Then they take one slow breath, feel their feet on the floor, and return to what they were doing. 10 seconds, 3 times a day. That's it. Over time, these tiny pauses create a new pattern. The person starts catching themselves drifting sooner. They notice when they're eating and reading and scrolling all at once. They notice when they're nodding in a conversation but actually writing a shopping list in their head. Attention becomes less like a rare visitor and more like a quiet friend standing beside them. The result isn't a perfect Zen-like existence. It's a life that actually feels lived. Of course, the mind will resist at first. It will say, "This is boring. This isn't working." You'll pay attention later, when you're less busy. That's the old autopilot trying to keep its job. The mentor smiles at this and invites the person to treat these excuses like clouds. They pass. The practice isn't destroyed by distraction. The practice is noticing distraction and coming back, again and again, without drama. Something beautiful happens when someone starts living with more attention. Ordinary things become strangely vivid. The sound of rain, the way sunlight hits a wall, the texture of a loved one's voice, all of it becomes more satisfying than half the content on their phone. People sometimes think mindfulness will make life flat and detached. In practice, it often makes life feel more colorful, more textured, more real than ever before. And here's a quiet secret. The attentive mind doesn't just help with peace, it helps with decisions. When someone is present, they notice their body's signals better. The tightening in the stomach when something feels wrong. The calm warmth when a path feels right. They catch the moment before they say yes to something they don't want, or before they send that message they'll regret. Attention doesn't shout, but it warns. If someone is listening, it can save them from a lot of unnecessary suffering. Yet, even with all of this, there's a deeper layer waiting under the surface. Once a person learns to be present in traffic, in conversations, in daily rituals, another question naturally appears. If awareness can change the way they experience the outside world, what could happen if they turned that same clarity toward the inside world? Their own thoughts, beliefs, and mental stories. That's where the next step of this journey quietly begins, just beneath the surface of everything they've started to notice. Did you like this topic? One text. When? Or would you like me to adjust something? Change the tone? Add more examples? Make it longer? Bachach shorter? Before we move on to topic 2, você disse, okay, o ChatGPT disse, most people grow up believing their mind is this loud boss they're forced to obey. A thought appears. You're not good enough. They're going to leave. You're going to fail. And the body reacts as if it just heard a sacred prophecy. The heart speeds up. The chest tightens. The day shifts. The mentor smiles gently at this and says, your mind is not your enemy. It's more like a scared assistant who drank too much coffee and keeps shouting things it thinks might protect you. It means well, but it's rarely accurate. The Buddha compared the mind to a monkey jumping from branch to branch. Today, that monkey jumps from notification to memory, from fear to fantasy, from what happened 5 years ago to what might happen next month. A person sits on the couch for 5 minutes and lives entire catastrophes that exist only in their head. By the time they stand up, they're exhausted, and nothing actually happened. The mentor doesn't blame them for this. He simply shows that they've been letting the monkey drive the car. Working against thoughts sounds like, I have to stop thinking like this. I need to shut my mind off. I must be positive. It's like yelling at a barking dog. The dog hears your tension and barks louder. In the same way, when a person fights their thoughts with force, the thoughts grow stronger, because resistance is still attention. The more they try to push a thought away, the more it behaves like a beach ball held underwater, waiting to explode back up. Working with thoughts is another energy entirely. Imagine an archer shaping an arrow, patient and calm, understanding how the wood bends, how it responds. He doesn't scream at the wood. He studies it. In the same way, the wise person studies their own thinking. Interesting. My mind always predicts rejection when I try something new. Where did that come from? That curiosity loosens the knot a little. Thoughts stop being iron laws and start looking more like old habits, wearing serious clothes. There's a classic story of someone who sat down to meditate for the first time, convinced it would be this peaceful, holy experience. Within 2 minutes, their brain turned into a shopping mall. Old conversations, unpaid bills, childhood embarrassments, imaginary arguments, even random songs, everything showed up. They stood up thinking, I'm terrible at this. My mind is broken. The teacher simply said, no, you just saw how it's been all along. That's progress. A key shift happens when a person stops saying, I am anxious, and begins saying, anxious thoughts are here. Do you feel the difference? The first sentence wraps their entire identity around the emotion. The second one puts a little space between who they are and what they're experiencing. That tiny gap is where freedom begins. The mind still produces its storms, but the person knows, I'm the sky, not the storm. A very practical way to work with thoughts is labeling. When a worrying script appears, what if they think I'm stupid? What if I mess this up? They gently name it. Ah, planning. Ah, catastrophizing. Ah, replaying the past. No need to insult themselves or analyze for 3 hours. Just a light label and a return to the present task. Over time, the brain learns that not every thought earns a full emotional reaction. The mentor often suggests simple tools, accessible to anyone. For example, keeping a thought journal for 1 week. Every time a heavy thought repeats 3 times in a day, the person writes it down. Later, they read it as if it belonged to a friend. Would they talk to that friend the way their mind talks to them? Would they believe those predictions so blindly? This kind of exercise, used in cognitive therapy and recommended in books like Feeling Good by David Burns, can open the eyes in a very real way. It's important to understand that thoughts are not random magic. They're products of conditioning, a strict parent, a humiliating moment at school, a breakup, a sickness, a stressful job. All of this becomes data the brain uses to create mental warnings. When the mind says, "Don't try, you'll fail," it's often trying to replay an old wound so the person doesn't get hurt again. The mentor acknowledges this intention, but gently points out that using yesterday's fear to predict tomorrow's life isn't wisdom. It's just habit. Another analogy the wise like to use is the mental radio. Imagine the brain as a radio that's always on, cycling through stations. Worry FM, Nostalgia FM, Self-criticism FM, Revenge FM. Most people live as if they're glued to whatever station comes up. Working with thoughts means remembering. I can change stations. The thought, "I'm worthless," is one station. The thought, "I'm learning and growing, even when I mess up," is another. Both are available. Which one gets more practice? Of course, the goal isn't to sugarcoat reality. If the mind says, "You're spending too much money," that might be wisdom, not anxiety. So the person asks a simple question. Is this thought helping me or just hurting me? Helpful thoughts might be uncomfortable, but lead to action, like checking finances, going to therapy, or having a difficult conversation. Harmful thoughts paralyze and spiral without ever producing a constructive step. The mentor invites people to walk with the former and bow politely to the latter. A very down-to-earth practice is called one breath reset. When someone notices they've been stuck in a thought loop for 5 count, 10 count, 30 minutes, they don't punish themselves. They simply stop, feel their feet on the floor, take one gentle breath, and say in their mind, "Back." That's all. Just one breath. One word. It's like pressing a soft reset button, not on the day, but on the way they're relating to their own mind. There are also moments when working with thoughts means bringing the body into the conversation. If someone has been overthinking for hours, walking around the block can change the entire internal landscape. The mentor might say, "Your brain is like a blender. If it's been spinning for too long, move the body to unplug it for a while." Simple actions, a short walk, a shower, a few stretches, can break the trance of thinking and remind the person they have a body, not just a head. For people who enjoy structure and learning, there are powerful resources out there. Books like The Happiness Trap by Russ Harris, about accepting thoughts instead of fighting them, or The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer, about watching the inner voice, can act like companions on this path. But the mentor always reminds, reading about thinking is not the same as observing your own thinking. The real classroom is their daily life, not the bookshelf. Sometimes, working with thoughts requires gentle humor. When the mind says, "Nobody likes you," Everyone is judging you. Your life is over. The person can respond with a small smile. Wow, dramatic today, aren't we? Not mocking, not cruel, just enough lightness to remember. This is a voice, not a god. That playful attitude takes away a bit of the mind's power. After all, it's hard for a thought to completely control someone when they're also a little amused by it. As the person practices, they start to notice patterns. Maybe their mind gets especially loud at night. Maybe criticism from others triggers a full internal storm. Maybe any kind of silence invites old fears to dance. This is gold, not a problem. Because once patterns are seen, they can be prepared for. A night routine, a self-compassion phrase after criticism, a mindfulness practice during quiet moments. These are all ways of walking hand in hand with their mind instead of being dragged by it. Still, even when someone learns to watch thoughts with more distance, there's another kind of inner storm that often feels stronger than any mental story. A flash of anger, a deep sense of hurt, an old resentment that jumps up like fire in the chest. Thoughts can be labeled and observed. But what about these burning emotions that almost demand reaction? That's where the next part of this journey begins to open, where mind and heart meet in the raw territory of anger and pain. There's a kind of anger that doesn't shout, doesn't throw things, doesn't slam doors. It sits quietly in the chest like hot coal, burning from the inside out. He knows this anger well. It shows up after betrayal, after being ignored, after feeling humiliated. Outside, everything looks normal. Inside, it's war. The mentor doesn't call this person bad or toxic. He just says, you're holding fire in your bare hands and expecting the other person to get burned. Most people learn early that anger is dangerous, so they do one of two things. Either they explode and regret it later, or they swallow everything and say, I'm fine, it's nothing, while their stomach twists. Neither strategy works. Exploding destroys trust. Swallowing destroys health. The wise approach isn't to deny anger or worship it. It's to get curious about what's hiding under it. Because under almost every anger, there's usually hurt, fear, or a feeling of being unseen. Imagine someone who was cheated on. Everyone tells them, move on, forget it. They don't deserve your tears. Sounds strong, right? But inside, he knows he's stuck replaying the scene in his mind like a movie he hates but keeps watching. He goes to sleep angry, wakes up angry, eats with anger, showers with anger. The person who hurt him is long gone, but they still live rent-free in his head. The mentor gently points out, at this point, they're not the one keeping you prisoners. Your own anger is... Buddha never said, don't feel anger. He wasn't asking anyone to become a robot. What he taught is that hatred never ends. Hatred. It only multiplies it. It's like trying to clean a dirty floor with a dirty mop. The more someone scrubs, the more the dirt spreads. When a person responds to hurt with more hurt, there's a quick rush of power, sure. But after that, a deeper emptiness appears, like the silence after slamming a door in the face of someone they love. There's a powerful story of a mother whose son was killed by a drunk driver. For years, she carried rage like armor. If anyone suggested forgiveness, she felt insulted. You want me to just let it go? No way. Her anger felt like loyalty to her son. Then one day, she visited the driver in prison. Not to forgive, not to be noble, just to look him in the eyes. What she saw wasn't a monster, but a broken, devastated human being drowning in his own guilt. Something cracked open. That crack wasn't immediate forgiveness. It was the beginning of seeing the whole picture instead of only one frame. Her anger began to soften, not because what he did was okay, but because holding on to hatred was killing her. The mentor explains that loving kindness isn't about saying, "What you did is fine." It's saying, "I refuse to let your choices poison my inner world any longer." That's a completely different power. Quieter, but much more stable. Anger often feels like strength, but most of the time it's a shield covering a wound. He notices that whenever someone talks to him in a dismissive tone, he snaps. On the surface, it looks like bad temper. Underneath, there's a childhood full of times he wasn't heard. Anger arrives to scream, "I matter," because his voice wasn't respected when he was smaller. The mentor invites him not to hate this reaction, but to listen to it. What is this anger trying to protect in you? A simple practice for anyone who tends to explode is the 3-breath rule. Before replying to a message that triggers them, before sending that long paragraph, before raising the voice, they stop and take 3 slow breaths. Not 10, not 30, just 3. During those breaths, they ask themselves, what exactly am I trying to defend here? My ego, my safety, my dignity. This tiny pause doesn't magically erase anger, but it often saves them from actions they'll replay for years. For those who swallow their anger, the work is different. They don't need fewer emotions. They need more honesty. They might start by journaling things they never said out loud. "I felt disrespected when you did this. I was hurt when that happened." It's not about sending those pages to anyone. It's about admitting the truth to themselves first. The mentor knows that unspoken anger doesn't disappear. It just finds quieter ways to sabotage peace. Insomnia, sarcasm, passive aggression, even physical pain. In Buddhism, there's a practice called metta, loving-kindness meditation. It starts with simple phrases. May I be safe. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I live with ease. For someone full of anger, even saying this to themselves can feel strange, almost illegal. They've been punishing themselves for so long that kindness feels fake. But the mentor insists, you can't give to others what you refuse to offer yourself. If you want to stop drowning others in your storms, you have to learn to calm your own waters first. After practicing for themselves, the person gradually extends the same phrases to others. Finabert, first to someone they love, then to someone neutral, like the bus driver or a colleague, and eventually, when they're ready, to someone who hurt them. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you live with ease. At first, it feels impossible. They might even feel angry just trying. That's okay. The practice isn't to feel love immediately. It's to plant a seed of willingness in the heart. People sometimes confuse this with becoming naive or weak. The mentor makes a clear point. Love does not delete boundaries. A person can wish peace for someone and still decide never to see them again. They can send compassion in meditation and still press block in real life. Forgiveness doesn't mean saying, what you did was okay. It means saying, I'm done carrying this around every day. It's less about the other person and more about reclaiming their own inner space. Practical example. Someone has a coworker who constantly disrespects them. Working with anger here might look like this. First, they acknowledge they're hurt instead of pretending they don't care. Then, they calm their system with a few breaths. Finally, they have a clear, firm conversation. When you speak to me that way in meetings, I feel disrespected. I'm not willing to accept that anymore. Notice how anger becomes fuel for a boundary, not bullets for another war. The mentor also talks about anger fatigue. When a person spends years being angry at the government, angry at their ex, angry at their family, angry at the world, something inside eventually gets tired. They wake up one day and realize, I don't even remember what peace feels like. That's usually the moment when they're ready for a different route. Not because they became too spiritual, but because they're simply exhausted from carrying so much fire. It's helpful to remember that anger always has a story attached to it. They should have treated me differently. Life shouldn't be like this. I should already be further ahead. The feeling is intense, but the story is negotiable. The person can't go back and rewrite what happened, but they can slowly rewrite what it means. Instead of, "This ruined me," they might experiment with, "This hurt me deeply, and I'm learning who I am beyond this." Same past, different future. As they walk this path, they start to see that every moment of anger is also a signpost. It points to something they value. Anger about injustice shows they care about fairness. Anger about disrespect reveals they value dignity. Anger about betrayal shows they long for loyalty. The mentor invites them to ask, what value is my anger defending? Then, instead of just burning, they can choose constructive action aligned with that value. Still, even as someone learns to work with anger and transform hatred into clearer boundaries and deeper understanding, another question begins to rise in the background. What if the real root of this anger isn't only what happened, but the terrifying fact that everything changes? Everyone leaves eventually, and nothing stays the same forever. When they finally dare to look directly at loss, death, and time itself, the shape of their anger and their entire life starts to shift in a completely different way. There's a truth everyone knows, and almost nobody wants to look at. He's going to die. Not someday in a philosophical sense, but on a real day, with a real date on a calendar. The same is true for everyone he loves. Most of the time, this truth stays in the background, like a notification he keeps swiping away. But it never stops being true. The mentor doesn't use this to scare him. He uses it as a high-powered flashlight that suddenly reveals what actually matters. He remembers a man who lived as if life were a rehearsal. He'd say, "One day I'll travel, one day I'll rest, one day I'll fix things with my father." Then came a diagnosis. No more one day. Just a limited number of real days. Suddenly, the things he'd postponed for years moved to the front of the line. The job title mattered less. The argument from 3 years ago? Almost meaningless. A simple conversation with his dad became more precious than any promotion. Death awareness, for a wise person, doesn't bring despair. It brings clarity. When someone really lets the idea in, there will be a last time I see this person, a last time I drink coffee, a last time I walk this street. The ordinary becomes sacred. The way the sunlight hits the kitchen table, the sound of a child laughing in another room. Even washing dishes can feel different when he realizes there's a final sink somewhere out there. Of course, most people don't think that way. They live like they're on an unlimited free trial, so they treat time like it's cheap. Hours go into resentment, endless scrolling, replaying old fights. They say, "I'll forgive later. I'll take care of myself later. I'll start living later." The mentor knows that later is the most dangerous word in any language. It quietly steals more dreams than failure ever will. There's a simple exercise he suggests, one that sounds dark at first, but is actually deeply kind. He invites the person to imagine they're on their deathbed, looking back at their current week, not their whole life, just this week. Would they be proud of how they spent it? Which moments would shine? Which habits would look ridiculous from that final perspective? It's like putting their schedule on trial in front of their future self. Nearly always, people notice the same things. They don't regret the imperfect body, the messy house, or the awkward social moment. They regret not expressing love while they could, not saying, "I'm sorry," when it mattered, not giving themselves permission to rest, to create, to be who they really were. The mentor isn't shocked by this. He's seen it many times. Death doesn't change people's values. It only reveals them. He tells the story of a woman who spent years in a cold war with her sister over an inheritance. They stopped speaking, both convinced they were right. Then the sister had a stroke. Standing in the hospital hallway, the woman suddenly forgot who should apologize first. She only saw a fragile human being in a hospital bed, someone who could be gone in a week. The anger didn't magically disappear, but the priority shifted. She realized that being right was far less important than being present. Impermanence isn't only about death. It's about everything. Friends move away. Bodies age. Children grow. Dreams change. That relationship he thought would last forever ends in a text. That job he thought was secure vanishes after a company decision. At first, this feels like a cruel joke. But the mentor shows another angle. If nothing changed, no pain would ever end either. The same stuckness he hates is broken by the same impermanence he fears. Think about how many times he thought, "I'll never get over this." And yet, slowly, he did. The heartbreak didn't disappear overnight, but its edges softened. The grief didn't vanish, but it found a quieter place in his chest. The mentor points to those moments and says, "See, change is always working, even when you're not looking." Impermanence is not against him. It's what allows healing, growth, and new beginnings to exist at all. A beautiful, simple practice is the last time meditation. Next time he hugs someone he loves, he silently thinks, "One day, this will be the last time. I don't know when." Not to scare himself, but to wake up fully inside that hug, to feel the warmth, the smell, the heartbeat, instead of half-hugging while his mind is on his phone or his to-do list. The mentor knows this turns ordinary contact into something almost holy. When people realize life is fragile, some go into panic mode and try to cram every second with extreme experiences. But chasing a bucket list isn't the same as living deeply. The wise way is quieter. It looks like choosing presence over performance. It's being fully there in a simple breakfast instead of fantasizing about a future vacation. It's daring to say, "I love you," now, not waiting for the right moment that may never arrive. Books like The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying have collected stories from people at the end of their lives. The pattern is almost always the same. They wish they had lived more true to themselves, not to others' expectations. They wish they had worked less and spent more time with people they loved. They wish they had allowed themselves to be happier. Reading this, he can treat it like a sad story, or like a cheat code, a preview of his own regrets if he doesn't change course. The mentor often asks a simple, ear-piercing question. If you died a year from now, and you knew it, what would you stop tolerating immediately? Maybe it's a draining relationship. Maybe it's a lifestyle that's destroying his health. Maybe it's the way he talks to himself every morning in the mirror. This question cuts through excuses. Suddenly, "I can't" becomes "I don't want to," or "I'm scared to," and that's much closer to the real truth. Death also has a strange way of shrinking ego battles. The argument about who messaged first, the silent treatment over a misunderstood phrase, feeling too proud to apologize. When seen through the lens of mortality, these things look like someone rearranging furniture on a ship that's eventually going to sink. It doesn't mean boundaries aren't important. It means some hills are not worth dying on when you remember you're actually going to die. At the same time, the mentor doesn't pretend this awareness is easy. Some nights, when he really lets the truth in, that his parents are aging, that his own body will one day stop working, a deep sadness appears. That's normal. It's the sadness of loving something temporary. Buddha never asked anyone to skip this sadness. He only warned against drowning in it. Feeling it fully is part of waking up. Clinging to it forever is a new prison. So he learns to let this sadness move through him like a wave. He might light a candle for someone he lost, write them a letter, or simply sit and breathe while a few tears fall. In that moment, his heart is both breaking and expanding. Breaking because nothing lasts. Expanding because he sees how precious everything is, because nothing lasts. The mentor knows this strange mix, tenderness and courage, is the exact place where real wisdom begins to grow. Yet, even as death awareness cleans his priorities, another pattern often shows up, almost louder than before. He sees how short life is, and then starts attacking himself for every mistake. How could I waste so much time? How could I be so stupid? How could I not be further along? The outside drama shrinks, but the inner critic grows, and that's when the next step of this journey becomes unavoidable. Learning to face not just mortality, but the harsh judge living inside his own head. There's an inner voice many people mistake for morality, but it behaves more like a bully than a guide. It doesn't say, "You made a mistake. Let's learn." It says, "You are a mistake." Every forgotten task, every awkward conversation, every failure at work becomes proof in its courtroom. He lives with this judge in his head and doesn't even question its authority. The mentor looks at him and says, "You know that voice never passed any exam, right? It just talks like a strict teacher that was never trained." Most people think there are only two options: either judge themselves brutally or ignore their behavior completely. So they bounce between extremes. One day they're hypercritical, calling themselves lazy, stupid, or weak. The next day they throw their hands up and say, "Whatever, I am who I am." Both roads hurt. One dissolves self-worth, the other blocks growth. The wise path sits right in the middle. Clear discernment without self-hatred. Discernment sounds fancy, but it's simple. It says, this action causes suffering. That action reduces suffering. I'll choose the second one more often. Judgment says, you yelled at your partner. You're a horrible human being. Discernment says, you yelled, it caused pain. Let's understand why and do better next time. Same event, two different inner worlds. One creates shame and paralysis, the other creates responsibility and movement. He once met a woman caught in a cycle of binge eating. After every episode, she would stand in front of the mirror and whisper, "You disgust me." She truly believed this harshness would motivate her to change. But the more she attacked herself, the more she felt hopeless and ashamed. And the more hopeless she felt, the more she ate to numb that pain. The inner judge wasn't fixing anything. It was pouring gasoline on the fire. Her turning point came when a therapist asked, "Would you speak to a child this way?" She immediately said, "Of course not." The therapist replied, "Then why do you think your own nervous system responds well to this kind of violence?" That landed. She started experimenting with a different tone. I binged. I'm hurting. I'm trying to cope with something. What am I really needing right now? For the first time in years, she felt curiosity instead of pure disgust. This doesn't mean letting herself off the hook. It means shifting from I'm trash to I'm in pain and I'm responsible for how I respond to it. That tiny change opened new possibilities. She could notice stress before it exploded into behavior. She could call a friend, go for a walk, or drink water instead of automatically reaching for food. The same woman, the same triggers, but now guided by discernment instead of a cruel inner judge. The mentor explains that the brain loves simple labels because they feel efficient. Good, bad, winner, loser, success, failure. They give the illusion of control, but reality is rarely that binary. A man can be a loving father and still struggle with addiction. A woman can be smart and still make terrible financial decisions. Judging the whole person instead of the specific behavior prevents any real change from happening. A helpful practice is writing 3 columns on paper. In the first, he writes what happened. In the second, what I told myself about it. In the third, what a wise, kind mentor would say. Maybe the event is, I froze in a meeting and forgot my point. The inner judge writes, you're incompetent. The wise voice writes, you were anxious. That's human. Let's prepare differently next time and maybe practice with a friend. Seeing these side by side makes it obvious which voice leads to growth. Self-compassion is often misunderstood as weakness or self-pity. It's not saying, everything I do is fine. It's saying, I can look at my flaws without stabbing myself in the process. Imagine a coach screaming at an athlete every time they miss. Eventually, the athlete will either quit or play terrified. Now imagine a coach who says, you missed. Let's slow it down and see what happened. Which one creates real excellence over time? He might start practicing this by changing one simple word. Instead of, I am a failure, he tries, I had a failure. One describes his identity, the other describes a moment. It sounds small, but the nervous system hears the difference. When failure is something he has, he can examine it, learn from it, and release it. When failure is something he is, it becomes permanent. Why would anyone even try if the conclusion is already written? There's also the habit of judging others harshly, which is usually a mirror facing inward. The colleague he calls lazy might reflect the part of him that fears being unproductive. The friend he calls too emotional might reflect the feelings he's not allowing himself to feel. The mentor doesn't say, stop judging others because it's wrong. He says, notice how your harshness toward them is teaching your brain how to treat you. A practical experiment is this. For 1 week, every time he catches himself thinking, what an idiot, about someone else, he pauses and asks, where in my life do I fear being seen the same way? This isn't to blame himself for everything. It's to use judgment as a flashlight instead of a weapon. The more he does this, the more he sees that his cruelty toward others and his cruelty toward himself come from the same tight, scared place. Books like Radical Acceptance by Tara Brach or Self-Compassion by Kristen Neff offer powerful tools to transform this inner landscape. They teach practices like placing a hand on the chest, taking a breath, and simply saying, this is a painful moment. Pain is part of life. May I be kind to myself in this moment? It sounds almost too simple, but for someone who's only ever responded to mistakes with judgment, it's like discovering a new language. In time, he realizes that discernment is actually sharper when it's paired with kindness. When he's not terrified of his own criticism, he can look at his patterns more honestly. It becomes easier to admit, I lied there, or I was selfish in that moment, because those admissions are no longer death sentences. They're simply data he can use to grow. Responsibility and gentleness start to coexist. The mentor often says, "You are not on trial here, you are in training." Trial energy asks, "Are you good or bad? Guilty or innocent?" Training energy asks, "What worked? What didn't? What can we try differently?" When he starts seeing his life through the lens of training, even painful experiences gain meaning. They become teachers instead of permanent stains on his character. As this shift deepens, he notices something interesting. His relationships change. People feel safer around someone who isn't constantly judging themselves or others. Friends open up more. Conflicts become easier to resolve. The same man who once attacked himself for every flaw now becomes the kind of person others go to when they've messed up, because his presence doesn't add more shame. It offers perspective and direction. And yet, even as this inner judge softens, there's still another trap waiting. He may stop attacking himself, but secretly start believing he's now better than those who are still asleep, still reactive, still lost in their own harshness. Humility can easily turn into subtle arrogance if he's not careful. That's why the next step on this path asks a different kind of honesty. The courage to admit, with a small smile, that the fool doesn't disappear just because he's learned a new way to speak to himself. There's something quietly powerful about a person who can say, "Honestly, I don't know." He used to think wisdom meant having an answer for everything, a quote for every situation, an opinion about every topic. At parties, he'd talk a lot, because silence felt like incompetence. But deep down, he knew he was bluffing half the time. The mentor smiles and says, "The real fool isn't the one who doesn't know. It's the one who doesn't know and pretends he does." From childhood, many people are rewarded for being the smart one. Good grades, quick answers, always prepared. That's fine, until they start building their identity on never being wrong. Then, every mistake feels dangerous. Every "I don't know" becomes a threat. So they double down, argue harder, refuse feedback. The wiser path is softer. I see one part of this. There might be more I'm not seeing yet. That sentence alone can save friendships, jobs, even marriages. There's an old story of a scholar who visited a Zen master. He wanted to show how much he knew. He talked non-stop about scriptures, interpretations, theories. The master poured him tea and kept pouring as the cup overflowed. The scholar shouted, "Stop! Can't you see it's full?" The master answered, "Exactly. How can I show you anything if your mind is like this cup?" The man finally understood. His problem wasn't ignorance. It was being too full of himself. He can probably recognize moments like that in his own life. Times when someone tried to show him another perspective and he shut it down instantly. Later, when the emotion cooled, he realized they were at least partly right. That late realization brings a strange mix: embarrassment and relief. Embarrassment for clinging so tightly to being right. Relief because now there's room to grow. The mentor would call that moment sacred. It's the ego cracking just enough for light to get in. Wisdom begins at the exact point where certainty ends. Saying, "I might be wrong," doesn't weaken a person. It strengthens them. It makes them flexible when reality doesn't fit their opinions. Think about arguments that turned into cold wars just because no one could say, "You know what? I didn't think about it that way." One single humble sentence could have saved months of silence. Not because someone was defeated, but because both sides chose truth over pride. A practical way to train this humility is what some therapists call the maybe habit. Instead of saying, "This is how it is," He practices saying, "Maybe it's like this, but maybe I'm missing something." It sounds small, but it changes the entire tone. It moves conversation from battlefield to laboratory. Instead of defending a castle, he's exploring a question. This shift makes people feel safer around him and makes him more open to actual learning. He might notice that the people he truly respects share this trait. They're often highly capable, yet strangely relaxed about not knowing. A good doctor can say, "I'm not sure yet, let's run more tests." A good leader can say, "I made the wrong call there." A good parent can say, "I overreacted, I'm sorry." None of these sentences destroy authority. In fact, they deepen it, because people trust those who are honest about their limits. On the other hand, he's probably met the opposite type, the person who knows everything. Every topic, every situation, they have the final word. At first, it might even be impressive. Over time, it becomes heavy. Conversations with them feel like exams. There's no room for curiosity, no space for surprise. The mentor would quietly point out, they're not actually strong, they're terrified of being seen as unsure. It's armor, not confidence. A helpful exercise is looking back at his own life and asking, where was I sure, and later I wasn't? Maybe about a relationship that felt eternal, a career that seemed like the only path, a belief he once defended with passion and later outgrew. Seeing how often he's changed shows something obvious but humbling. His current certainties are probably not the final version either. That's not an insult. That's the normal process of a human being evolving. Books like Thinking, Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, or Mistakes Were Made, But Not by Me by Tavris and Aronson, show how the brain loves to protect its own stories. Once he believes something, his mind looks for proof he's right and ignores everything else. Knowing this, he can treat his opinions less like sacred truth and more like drafts. Useful for now, but open to being edited as life gives him new information. Humility doesn't mean shrinking or pretending to know less than he does. It means seeing himself as a permanent student, even in the areas where he's a teacher. He might guide others in meditation or mindfulness one day, yet still struggle with impatience in traffic. Instead of seeing that as hypocrisy, he can see it as honesty. I'm walking this path with you, not above you. People connect much more with a mentor who says, "I've been there," than with one who pretends to be flawless. There's also a funny, quiet freedom in admitting, "I'm confused." Instead of wasting energy faking certainty, he can focus on asking better questions. What am I not seeing? Who could help me understand this? What if the opposite of what I believe is at least partially true? These questions don't weaken him, they sharpen him. They turn life into a living classroom instead of a stage where he has to perform being right all the time. One very practical practice is deliberately switching roles in his mind. When he feels absolutely sure about something, he can ask, "If I had to argue the other side, what would I say?" At first, this feels annoying. The ego hates it, but over time, it trains flexibility. He starts to see that even if he keeps the same conclusion, he now understands the complexity better. That's the difference between a rigid opinion and an informed, living view. The wise fool, the one who knows he doesn't know, walks lighter. He doesn't need to win every debate. He doesn't panic when new information appears. He doesn't crumble when proven wrong. He simply updates himself like a good piece of software. Ah, new data. Let's adjust. The real fool is stuck in version 1.0 of himself, refusing all updates because he doesn't want to admit there's room to improve. As this humility grows, something interesting happens. praise and criticism stop hitting so hard. When someone calls him smart, he can smile and think. Sometimes, when someone calls him foolish, he can smile and think. Also, sometimes, his worth is no longer glued to being seen as right. And that gentle distance from others' opinions opens the door to a new kind of stability, one that doesn't rise and fall with every compliment or insult. And that's exactly where the next part of his journey will lead him, into the stormy world of praise and blame, success and failure, likes and dislikes, and how a person can stand like a mountain in the middle of all that wind without becoming cold or numb. There's a specific kind of exhaustion that comes from living as if you're on trial in everyone else's court. One compliment, and he feels 10 feet tall. One criticism, and he shrinks into himself. A promotion at work. He's a genius. A small mistake in public. He's an idiot. His mood swings not because life is truly changing every hour, but because he's letting every opinion rewrite his worth. The mentor looks at him kindly and says, "You're not living your life. You're living every passing comment about your life." The Buddha compared the wise person to a mountain and other people's opinions to the wind. Wind can be loud, aggressive, even violent. But the mountain doesn't chase it, doesn't fight it, doesn't beg it to blow a certain way. It just stands. Most people, though, live like leaves. A little praise, they're flying high. A little blame, they're crushed on the ground. No center, no root, just reaction. The mentor isn't judging this. He just knows how tiring it is to be that leaf. In the modern world, this wind has been weaponized into metrics. Likes, views, comments, shares. He posts a photo or a thought, and within minutes he knows if the crowd approves. His nervous system wasn't designed for that much feedback. One video does well, and he thinks, maybe I matter. The next flops, and he wonders, what's wrong with me? Social media is supposed to be about sharing, but for many it becomes a mirror that never stops asking, are you enough now? What about now? The mentor explains that praise feels good because it touches something deep, the desire to be seen and valued. That part of him is natural. The problem isn't wanting appreciation, it's becoming addicted to it. When he can't feel okay unless someone is clapping, he's not just enjoying praise, he's depending on it like oxygen from a tank someone else controls. That's a very scary way to breathe. One unplugged hose, and he's gasping. Blame works the same way in reverse. One harsh comment, and his whole day collapses. It might come from a stranger online, a boss in a bad mood, or a family member projecting their own pain. But his inner system doesn't ask where it came from. It just sees disapproval and sounds the alarm. He spends hours replaying the words, trying to fix his image in their eyes, even when they've already moved on. It's like drinking poison to punish the one who handed him the cup. Equanimity doesn't mean he stops caring. It means he stops collapsing. Imagine he gives a presentation at work. Some colleagues say, "That was amazing." Others say, "It was fine, but you talked too fast." Old him spends the night editing his personality based on every comment. The wiser version listens carefully, takes what's useful, I can slow down, and leaves the rest. His worth doesn't move an inch. The mountain heard the wind and stayed. A practical exercise. After receiving either praise or criticism, he asks 2 questions. First, is this feedback specific? Second, is it coming from someone who sees the whole picture? If a boss says, "Your report was clear," that's specific and useful. He can repeat that clarity. If an angry stranger online says, "You're trash," that's not about him. It's about their storm. This simple filter saves him from letting every random gust of wind reshape the mountain. It's funny how often people say, "I don't care what others think," usually when they care a lot. The mentor suggests a more honest stance. I'm learning to care about others' thoughts without being controlled by them. That leaves room for feedback, growth, and healthy relationship, without handing his entire sense of self to the nearest opinion. He can respect others' views without hiring them as judges of his soul. He might notice that when he's desperate for praise, he becomes easy to manipulate. A little flattery, and he'll agree to things he doesn't want. A little criticism, and he'll abandon things that matter to him. Marketers, abusers, even well-meaning people can pull these strings without realizing it. Equanimity cuts those strings. It's not coldness, it's protection. When his center is inside him, not in someone else's mouth, he becomes harder to push around. Books like The Courage to be Disliked point to this same idea. Other people's opinions belong to them. Their reactions are shaped by their history, their mood, their values, their wounds. He's responsible for his actions, not for managing every feeling those actions create in others. Of course, if he's consistently hurting people, that's a different conversation. But being disliked for being honest, kind, and authentic, that's not a problem. That's a side effect of being real. One useful practice is what we might call sitting in the middle. When someone praises him, he mentally says, "Thank you," but also, "This is one view." When someone criticizes him, he mentally says, "Thank you," and again, "This is one view." He doesn't glue either comment to his forehead. He puts both on the table, looks at them, takes what's true, and lets the rest float away. Over time, his nervous system learns that not every reaction is a life or death verdict. The mentor might invite him to remember a time he was very critical of someone, only to later realize he didn't know the full story. Maybe he judged a friend for seeming distant, then discovered they were going through a private crisis. That memory is important. It shows that his own judgments are often incomplete. If that's true of his opinions about others, it's also true of others' opinions about him. Praise and blame are rarely based on the full picture. Equanimity also protects joy. If his happiness depends on everything going his way, everyone liking him, every project succeeding, every post performing, he'll rarely feel truly at peace. There's always another verdict coming, but when he can stand in himself while the winds blow, he's free to enjoy praise when it comes, and learn from criticism when it comes, without either one owning him. Joy then comes from living aligned with his values, not from chasing approval. A simple, real-world example. Imagine he posts something vulnerable online. One comment says, "This helped me so much." Another says, "You're overreacting. This is stupid." Equanimity doesn't mean he feels nothing. He might smile at the first and feel a sting from the second. That's human. But after the first emotional wave, he returns to center and asks, "Did sharing this feel honest and right for me?" If the answer is yes, he keeps walking. The mountain nods at the wind and continues being a mountain. Over time, as he practices this, people around him will feel the difference. They'll sense that he's not easily flattered and not easily crushed. He becomes trustworthy because his reactions aren't wildly unstable. Ironically, when a person is less hungry for praise, the praise they receive tends to be more genuine. People feel less pressure to manage his emotions and more freedom to speak honestly, knowing he won't break apart. But there's a subtle danger here too. As he grows more stable in the face of praise and blame, he might be tempted to drift into a different kind of escape, using equanimity as an excuse to disconnect, to observe life from a distance instead of participating fully. That's why the next step on this journey is so important. Learning how to stay deeply engaged with happiness and sorrow, with laughter and grief, without losing that inner balance he's slowly beginning to taste. There's a moment when he realizes something strange. His life is not made of big events. It's made of ordinary Tuesdays. Not the wedding, but the breakfasts. Not the promotion, but the boring meetings. And yet his mind is trained to only wake up for extremes, huge joy or deep pain. The rest of the time, he's half asleep, walking through his own days like a ghost. The mentor looks at him and says, "Real mindfulness isn't just for crisis and fireworks. It's for when you're brushing your teeth." He once believed being spiritual meant floating above everything, not feeling too much, staying calm like a statue. So when he heard about mindfulness, he imagined watching life from a safe distance. No mess, no noise, no heartbreak. Just a quiet observer sitting on a cloud. But the Buddha's version is very different. It's not about escaping life. It's about being so present in it that even washing a dish becomes a full experience, not just something to get through. The mentor uses a simple image, watching a movie. When a sad scene plays, he feels it, eyes sting, throat tightens. But he doesn't jump on the screen to fix the character's life. He knows it's a movie, and that knowing lets him feel fully and stay grounded. That's the attitude of real mindfulness, fully in the story, fully feeling, but with a quiet awareness in the background, whispering, "This is an experience passing through. You are more than this moment." When happiness comes, he usually grabs it like someone hoarding oxygen. Don't end, don't change, stay like this forever. Ironically, this clinging kills the joy faster. He spends half the moment anxious that it will end instead of actually living it. When sorrow comes, he does the opposite. He fights, denies, distracts, numbs. Mindfulness suggests a strange third option. Let both come and go, joy and sorrow, without grabbing or pushing away. Just be there. He might test this on a small scale. One morning, he drinks his coffee without his phone. At first it feels awkward, almost boring. Then senses start to wake up. The warmth in his hands, the smell rising, the taste on his tongue. It's still the same drink, but not the same experience. For a moment, his mind stops time traveling. No yesterday, no tomorrow, just coffee. The mentor smiles. There, that's mindfulness. Nothing mystical, just you being where you actually are. Then there are the heavy days when sorrow hits hard. A breakup, a loss, a diagnosis. The mind wants to either drown in it or run from it. Mindfulness doesn't say, "Cheer up," or "Don't think about it." It says, "Stay with this gently. Feel the ache in your chest. Notice the lump in your throat, the heaviness in your body." Not to torture himself, but to stop adding extra suffering. The stories, the blame, the "this should not be happening to me" echo that turns pain into a prison. He discovers something unexpected. When he allows sadness to be there without fighting it, the sadness moves. Not quickly, not neatly, but it moves. Like a wave that rises, crests, and then slowly falls. When he resists, it freezes. Months later, he's still carrying it like a stone in his pocket. The mentor teaches him to ask, in those moments, "Can I feel this for just 10 seconds without running?" 10 seconds is usually survivable. Then another 10. That's how courage grows. Mindfulness also transforms small annoyances that used to hijack his entire day. Traffic, waiting in line, a delayed email. Before, these were invitations to rage or numb scrolling. Now he experiments. What if this red light is a mini retreat? He notices his breath, the play of light on the windshield, the thought that wants to complain. He doesn't have to pretend he loves traffic. He just doesn't let it own his nervous system anymore. This is how ordinary suffering slowly loses its grip. The old habit is to wait for conditions to be perfect before being present. When I'm on vacation, then I'll relax. When the house is clean, then I'll enjoy being here. When my mental health is perfect, then I'll meditate. Mindfulness flips it. Presence comes first. Conditions follow. The mentor likes to say, "You don't meditate because life is calm. You meditate because life isn't." The mess doesn't disqualify him from awareness. It's the very reason he needs it. On good days, mindfulness keeps him from speeding past his own joy. On bad days, it keeps him from believing, this is how it will always be. He begins to see that every state has a rise, a peak, and a fall. Excitement, fear, boredom, rage, they all have a life cycle. Instead of identifying with each one, I am anxious, I am hopeless, he starts to think, anxiety is here, hopelessness is visiting. Visitors don't own the house. They come and go. He might also notice that mindfulness makes him kinder without trying to be a good person. When he's actually present with his own pain, he recognizes it in others more easily. The coworker who snaps, he sees tension in their shoulders, the fatigue in their eyes. He doesn't excuse harmful behavior, but he understands it. The mentor reminds him, when you're present enough to feel your own heart, you automatically start seeing that everyone else has one too. Of course, his mind still wanders a lot. He sits for 5 minutes and thinks about groceries, childhood memories, random songs, that embarrassing thing from years ago. The beginner mistake is believing this means he's failing. The wiser view is this: every time he notices he was lost and comes back, that is the practice. It's like doing a rep at the gym. Lost, back, lost, back. Each return is shaping a new kind of mental muscle. A simple daily practice might look like this. Once a day, he chooses a mindfulness anchor in his routine. It could be brushing his teeth, taking a shower, or walking to the bus stop. For those 2 or 3 minutes, he commits to being fully there. Senses on. Phone away. If his mind wanders, he doesn't scold himself. He just returns to the taste of mint, the feel of water, the sound of footsteps. Slowly, this presence leaks into other parts of his day. After some months, he notices something subtle. Life didn't get easier, but it got clearer. The same ups and downs, but less confusion. Less, why is this happening to me? And more, this is the part where sadness visits. Or, this is the part where joy appears and I know it won't last. So I'm going to really live it while it's here. That clarity doesn't remove pain, but it removes a layer of panic that used to sit on top of everything. Yet there's still another layer to explore. As he becomes more present, something else starts to stand out in high definition. How much of his day is driven by wanting? Wanting more comfort, more approval, more stimulation, more everything. Even his mindfulness practice can secretly become a desire to be more spiritual, to reach some special state. To really deepen this path, he'll have to look directly at his relationship with desire itself and discover what freedom could feel like when he doesn't spend his entire life chasing the next better moment. Desire has a very clever costume. It rarely shows up saying, "Hi, I'm craving. I'm here to control your life." No, it comes dressed as just one more episode. I deserve this, or I'll finally be happy when. He knows this feeling well. It's the restless itch that appears right after he gets what he wanted. New phone? Feels holy for 3 days. Then the mind whispers, "Okay, what's next?" The mentor smiles and says, "See, that buzz you call happiness is often just craving taking a break." Buddha didn't say, "Eliminate all desire and live like a rock." Rocks don't suffer, but they also don't laugh. The issue isn't wanting in itself. The issue is needing everything to be exactly a certain way before he allows himself to feel okay. There's a big difference between "I'd like this" and "if I don't get this, I can't stand my own existence." The first is human. The second is the chain around his neck. Look at an ordinary day. He wakes up and reaches for his phone before his own thoughts. First craving satisfied. Stimulation. Then coffee. Then notifications. Then the little rush of someone liking a post. By 9 MPT. Ranti, his mind has already been trained. Keep feeding me, or I'll punish you with anxiety. None of these things are evil, but together they form a pattern, always leaning forward into the next hit of more. The mentor offers a simple test. Sit quietly for 5 minutes without doing anything, and notice what happens. For most people, it feels like ants under the skin. The mind starts shouting, "This is pointless. Check your messages. Stand up. Change something." That discomfort isn't boredom. It's withdrawal. Withdrawal from constant distraction, from the addiction to being entertained, to always having something to reach for. He once met a woman who thought her problem was shopping. Every time she felt lonely or stressed, she'd go online and buy something. New shoes, new gadgets, things she didn't really need. Her closet looked like a small store. But the real problem wasn't the purchases, it was the story behind them. New things mean a new me. The packages kept arriving, but the person opening them was always the same, carrying the same unprocessed pain. When she finally paused long enough to look underneath, she realized the moments she wanted to shop the most were the moments she felt most empty. Instead of judging herself, "I'm so stupid," the mentor invited her to ask, "What am I really hungry for?" Connection, rest, comfort. Once she started calling a friend or taking a walk instead of always buying something, the craving felt less like a monster and more like a confused child knocking at the wrong door. He might recognize his own version of this. Maybe it's not shopping, maybe it's scrolling, porn, junk food, work, gym, dating apps, anything that promises a quick upgrade to his emotional state. Again, these things are not automatically wrong. The question is, am I using this, or is this using me? Freedom doesn't mean he never enjoys pleasures. It means he's able to say no without feeling like the world is ending. Buddha's image of joy in an empty forest is beautiful because nothing special is happening there. No fireworks, no applause, no luxury, just trees, air, and presence. In modern terms, it's like finding a quiet joy in a simple room, with no notifications, no background noise, just him breathing. At first, that feels like nothing. Over time, if he stays, he discovers it's actually everything he's been trying to buy in fragmented form. A practical experiment. For one day, he chooses one thing to abstain from. Not forever, just for 24 hours. It could be sugar, social media, online shopping, or checking messages after 9 p.m. Pati, ifi, tati. He watches what his mind does, the irritation, the excuses, the negotiations, just this once. That inner chaos is pure gold. It reveals how strong the chain is. Observing it calmly is already the first step in loosening it. He can also practice conscious wanting. Instead of mindlessly chasing every impulse, he pauses and names it, right now, I want validation. I want escape. I want comfort. Just naming the desire out loud gives him distance. It's no longer an invisible driver. It becomes something he can see, question, and sometimes gently decline. The mentor likes to say, if you can name it, you don't have to obey it. Books like Digital Minimalism by Cal Newport give practical strategies for this. Not to turn life into a monk's cave, but to help him reduce noise enough to feel his own mind again. Sometimes it's as simple as scheduling no-input walks, where he goes outside without headphones or phone. The first few times, the silence is weird. Then something opens. Creativity returns. Insights appear. Underneath craving, there was always wisdom waiting. He might notice that some of his biggest regrets came from impulsive desires, sending that angry text, cheating for a moment of thrill, saying yes to something he knew was wrong because it felt good in the moment. Craving always sells the same lie. Do this now, and I'll leave you alone. But it never leaves. It only asks for more. When he sees that clearly, not as theory but in his own history, saying no stops feeling like sacrifice and starts feeling like self-respect. Still, the goal isn't to become a joyless monk who rejects every pleasure. The middle way is simple. Enjoy without clinging. Eat the cake, taste it fully, and then let it go. No need for 3 more slices to chase the first feeling. Watch a movie and enjoy it, without needing to watch 10 in a row. Love someone deeply, without making them responsible for filling every empty space inside him. Desire can stay, but craving doesn't get to drive. One beautiful question to check his alignment is, if everything I'm chasing vanished tomorrow, what would I still have inside? If the answer is nothing, then his work isn't to acquire more. It's to build an inner life through practice, reflection, values, and presence. Because the only joy that can't be stolen is the joy that doesn't depend on constant stimulation or on things staying exactly as he wants. And it's exactly when he begins to taste this simpler joy, joy that comes from being instead of endlessly acquiring, that a new challenge shows up. How to keep this inner peace when the world outside doesn't calm down with him. Phones still ring, people still suffer, crises still happen. The next step is learning how to carry this quiet forest inside, even when life feels like a crowded city, noisy, messy, and full of other people's storms. There's a strange belief many people carry without noticing. I'll finally be at peace when my life calms down. He repeats this to himself like a mantra. When I earn more, when my family stops arguing, when I move to a quieter place, then I'll relax. But year after year, something new appears. Bills, illness, politics, stress. The mentor gently says, have you noticed? The outside world didn't sign a contract to cooperate with your peace. He imagines peace as a cabin in the mountains or a beach with no notifications. Beautiful, sure, but that's not the peace Buddha talked about. If he needs perfect conditions to feel okay, then his peace is as fragile as a soap bubble. One loud noise, one sudden problem, and pop. True inner peace is more like a deep ocean. Storms happen on the surface. Waves crash. But down below, it stays steady. That's the level the mentor wants to guide him toward. He once met a nurse who worked in an emergency room. Sirens, crying families, bleeding patients, constant urgency. On paper, she should have been burned out, angry, numb. But there was a calmness in her eyes that felt almost impossible in that chaos. She laughed softly and said, "If I panic, everyone loses. My peace is my job." She wasn't cold. She was deeply present, and that presence anchored everyone around her. This shows a key truth. Peace isn't the absence of problems. It's the presence of a stable center. When everything around him is spinning, his mind wants to spin too. What if this never ends? What if everything falls apart? The mentor invites him to experiment with a different approach. What if, just for this moment, you don't try to fix the entire future? What if you only breathe and handle this next step? One simple practice is building tiny islands of peace during the day. He doesn't need an hour-long retreat. He can take 60 seconds between tasks to close his eyes, feel his feet on the floor, and notice his breath. That's it. 1 minute? If he does this 10 times a day, he's spending more total time in real presence than many people do in a week. His brain slowly learns, oh, peace is available here, not just on vacation. It's important to understand that inner peace is not indifference. He's not becoming a stone who doesn't care. In fact, the calmest people often care the most. They feel deeply, but they don't drown. They set boundaries. They say no when needed. They cry when something hurts. The difference is, they don't let every emotion drive the car. Feelings sit in the passenger seat. Awareness holds the wheel. He might try this during a conflict. Instead of firing back immediately in a heated argument, he pauses and quietly asks himself, where in my body is this anger or fear right now? Maybe it's a tight chest, a knot in the stomach, a hot face. For a few seconds, he focuses on sensation instead of story. That tiny pause often prevents an explosion that would take hours or years to repair. Another powerful tool is what the mentor calls the one-room rule. The mind loves to drag the whole universe into a single moment. Past mistakes, future fears, global headlines. The one-room rule asks, in this exact room, right now, what is actually happening? If he's sitting on his couch, breathing, the answer might be, I'm safe. I'm just having scary thoughts. Naming this reality starts to unplug his nervous system from panic mode. Of course, there are days when life really is heavy. A sick relative, a job on the line, a child in trouble. In those moments, peace doesn't mean feeling good. It means not abandoning himself. He eats, he sleeps as best he can, he takes a shower, he asks for help. He reminds himself, I don't have to solve everything today. I only need to take the next compassionate step. Peace becomes practical, not poetic. Books like The Untethered Soul or Full Catastrophe Living describe people who found inner stability in brutally difficult circumstances. Divorce, illness, loss. They don't sugarcoat anything. What they show, instead, is this. When he learns to watch his thoughts and emotions instead of being welded to them, something opens. There's a him that notices the storm, and that him doesn't break as easily as he feared. Community helps a lot here. Trying to stay centered alone in a chaotic world is possible, but hard. Practicing with others, whether in a meditation group, a therapy circle, or even a small group of friends who talk honestly about mental health, reminds him he's not crazy and he's not alone. The mentor might say, find people who are also learning to breathe in the fire, walk with them, borrow their calm when yours is low. At some point, he'll face a painful truth. There will never be a time when everything is under control. Not globally, not in his family, not even in his own mind. If he waits for absolute order to feel peaceful, he'll die waiting. That's not a curse. It's an invitation. Peace becomes not a destination, but a skill. Something he practices now, in this messy, noisy, imperfect life. A beautiful practice is finding one still point in hectic situations. In a crowded bus, it might be the feeling of his feet on the floor. In a stressful meeting, it might be the sensation of the air entering and leaving his nose. While putting kids to bed after a chaotic day, it might be noticing the warmth of their small hands. He doesn't fix the chaos. He finds an anchor inside it. Over time, he may notice people reacting differently around him. They start saying things like, "You're so calm," or "You're easy to talk to." They don't know all the inner work he's doing. They just feel the result. Someone who's not constantly on edge, not always broadcasting panic. His peace becomes a quiet, invisible gift to everyone who crosses his path. Still, there's a very human temptation hiding in this new calm. Once he learns to be the stable one, he might start doing something dangerous, forgetting himself again, taking on everyone's problems, carrying more than his share, becoming the emotional trash can for others. That's not peace, that's exhaustion in disguise. And exactly there, in the space between caring for others and caring for himself, a deeper teaching appears, the art of letting go, of releasing attachments without closing the heart. He grew up in a world where people talk just to fill silence, small talk at the bus stop, endless voice notes, group chats that never sleep. So it never crossed his mind that words could be sacred. To him, they were like background noise, cheap, disposable, unlimited. The mentor leans in and says, "Your mouth is the front door of your karma. Whatever leaves it doesn't come back the same way." Suddenly, speaking doesn't look so casual anymore. He's used to measuring communication by quantity. Long texts mean you care. Long speeches mean you're smart. Long posts mean you're deep. But Buddha flips everything upside down. Better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace. One sincere, "I'm sorry," can heal years of distance. One honest, "I love you," can change someone's entire week. One "no" spoken clearly can protect his entire future. It's not volume that matters, it's impact. He knows people who talk constantly but never really say anything. They complain, gossip, repeat the same dramas like reruns of a series that should have been canceled seasons ago. After hours with them, he feels drained and strangely empty. Then there are people who speak less, but when they do, everyone leans in. It's not magic, it's intention. They don't waste words. They treat them like arrows that must be aimed, not like confetti thrown in the air. The mentor gives him a simple 4-door test before speaking. Is it true? Is it kind? Is it useful? Is it the right time? If a sentence doesn't pass through all 4 doors, maybe it isn't ready to leave his mouth. For example, telling a friend, "You look tired," might be true, but is it kind or useful? Telling a colleague, "You messed up in front of everyone," might be useful. But is this the right time? Maybe not in a crowded room. He once knew a guy who joked all the time at other people's expense. Everyone laughed. But later, in private, those same people said, "I don't really trust him." He couldn't understand why. From his point of view, it was just humor. The mentor helped him see that every joke was secretly a message. You're not safe with me. Words don't disappear in the air. They settle inside people. Some create warmth. Others leave scars. On the other hand, there was a quiet woman at his job. She wasn't the loudest in meetings, but when conflict erupted, she'd say a single sentence that settled the room. Once, in a tense discussion, she simply said, "Can we remember we're on the same team?" And the atmosphere changed. She wasn't a genius superhero. She just waited until she could say something that built a bridge instead of adding fuel to the fire. He starts noticing how much of his own speech is autopilot, saying yes when he wants to say no, laughing at jokes he doesn't find funny, telling little white lies just to avoid discomfort. Each of these seems harmless, but together they create a life that doesn't feel like his. Right speech isn't just about not hurting others, it's about not abandoning himself with his own mouth. A practical exercise. For one day, he speaks 20% less, not in a weird, cold way, just fewer automatic comments. He listens more, pauses more, answers with intention. At first it feels awkward, like he's breaking a habit of nervous chatter. But then he notices something. The words he does choose land differently. People pay more attention. Conversations feel deeper. Silence starts to feel like a friend, not a threat. He also starts to see how words plant long-term seeds. A teacher who once said, "You're not creative," might still echo in someone's head 20 years later. A parent who said, "I'm proud of you, not because you're perfect, but because you're trying," can become an inner anchor during hard seasons. When he understands this, sarcasm stops being just sarcasm. It becomes a choice. Do I want to plant poison or medicine here? Books like Nonviolent Communication show how tiny shifts in language transform relationships. Instead of, "You never listen to me," he can say, "When I'm sharing and you look at your phone, I feel invisible." One attacks identity. The other reveals experience and invites connection. Same situation, different outcome. Right speech always looks for the door that leads to understanding, not to winning. He realizes that his most dangerous words are rarely the ones he says out loud. They're the ones he whispers to himself. "I'm hopeless. I always ruin everything. Nobody really cares." These sentences create an emotional climate inside him. If he'd never say them to a friend, why does he think they're okay to say to his own heart? Right speech starts in the mirror. How he talks to himself sets the tone for everything else. A simple practice is to catch one recurring negative phrase and swap it for something wiser. For example, "I'm such an idiot" becomes, "I made a mistake, but I'm learning." Or, "Everything goes wrong for me" becomes, "This is hard, but I've survived hard things before." It's not cheesy affirmation, it's honest kindness. Over time, his inner voice shifts from enemy to ally. Conflict becomes a training ground for this new way of speaking. In the heat of an argument, his old pattern is to attack. "You always do this. You're impossible. Forget it." These feel powerful in the moment, but they leave long-term damage. The wiser move is harder at first. "I'm hurt. I feel dismissed. I need to pause and breathe." It's less dramatic, but far more effective if what he wants is healing, not just victory. Another helpful habit is embracing silence as an option, not a failure. When someone shares something vulnerable, he doesn't have to fill the gap with advice or stories about himself. Sometimes the most powerful word is simply, "I hear you," followed by actual listening. People remember that kind of presence much more than they remember the perfect, clever response. As his relationship with speech evolves, he notices something subtle. His words begin to match his values. He stops promising things he won't do. He stops saying, "It's fine," when it isn't. He stops flattering to get approval. His mouth and his heart start working on the same team. That alignment brings a quiet confidence no motivational quote can manufacture. The mentor reminds him, "Every sentence you speak writes part of your story. Talk like someone who knows their story matters." This doesn't mean walking on eggshells, terrified of every syllable. It means remembering that each conversation is an opportunity to either bring a bit more peace into the room or a bit more chaos. He may not control who walks in, but he controls what leaves his lips. And as he becomes more careful and more powerful with his words, a new question appears on the horizon. If speech is this strong, what about the impulses that fuel it? The anger, the cravings, the habits that burst out before he can catch them? That's where the next step of his journey points. Not just mastering what comes out of his mouth, but mastering the restless forces inside him that try to run his life. Most people are raised to admire the conquerors of the world, the athlete who crushes the competition, the CEO who dominates the market, the influencer who destroys the haters. He grew up with that idea too. Power means beating someone. Then one day the mentor asked, "Tell me, if you win every argument but lose control of your own temper, who's really in charge?" That question hit harder than any opponent ever had. He starts to notice something uncomfortable. It's easy to look calm when life is going his way. But when traffic is insane, or someone disrespects him, or plans collapse at the last minute, something wild wakes up inside. Words slip out he didn't mean. Decisions are made he later regrets. It's like a stranger is using his body. Self-mastery, the mentor explains, is when that stranger doesn't get to drive anymore. Buddha talked about 3 inner enemies: greed, hatred, and delusion. They sound poetic until he sees them in real life. Greed when he can't stop chasing more likes, more money, more validation. Hatred when he explodes because someone poked his pride. Delusion when he's telling himself stories that simply aren't true, but he clings to them anyway. Those are his real opponents, not the people around him. The mentor tells him about a man in recovery from addiction. For years, his whole life revolved around just one more time. Every morning he'd promise to stop. Every night he'd break the promise. When he finally got clean, he said, "I had to fight my own mind every single day." The bottle was just the weapon. The real battle was against that voice in me that wanted escape at any cost. That's self-mastery, winning those invisible battles. He starts seeing his own bottle. Maybe it's not substance. Maybe it's doom scrolling, rage, late-night overeating, or relationships that are bad but familiar. Anything he runs to when life hurts and he doesn't want to feel. The habit itself is only half the problem. The real issue is the automatic pattern. Pain appears, impulse takes over, awareness disappears. Mastery begins exactly where that autopilot ends. A very practical step is this: insert one breath between impulse and action. Just one. He feels anger rising, the urge to snap. Before speaking, he silently counts one long inhale and exhale. That's it. Sometimes he still explodes, but sometimes, miraculously, the pause is long enough for another option to appear. It's like discovering a secret side door in a hallway he thought had only one way out. The mentor compares self-mastery to taming a powerful animal. You don't beat a horse into being useful. You train it patiently. At first, it runs in all directions, wild and reactive. Over time, with steady guidance, It learns to respond. His mind is that horse. His emotions are that horse. Brutality doesn't work. Shame doesn't work. Patient, firm training does. Every time he returns to awareness, he's putting his hand on the reins again. He realizes that conquering others often comes from inner weakness, not strength. The boss who screams at everyone, terrified of losing control. The partner who manipulates, afraid of abandonment. The friend who always has to win the argument, afraid of being seen as small. When someone is truly strong inside, they don't need to dominate. They can let others shine without feeling threatened. Self-mastery doesn't mean never feeling anger or fear. Those emotions are part of being human. It means not being kidnapped by them. Imagine anger as a fire. Without mastery, he's standing inside the flames, burning with every spark. With mastery, he can step outside, see the fire, feel its heat, and decide what to do with it. Cook with it, warm himself, let it die down. The fire stops being the boss. He can test his progress in the most humble places. The supermarket line, a glitchy computer, a rude comment. Before, these were reasons to lose it. Now they're training grounds. He notices, my chest is tight, my jaw is clenching, my thoughts want to attack. Just seeing this clearly is already different from being fused with it. It turns unconscious reaction into conscious choice. Books like Atomic Habits talk about tiny, repeated choices shaping a whole identity. Buddha was saying something very similar long ago. Every time he chooses not to send the hateful message, not to scroll until 3 a.m., not to drown in self-pity, he is voting for a new version of himself. One act won't transform everything. 1,000 small acts will. Self-mastery is built in the quiet moments no one else sees. He might feel discouraged sometimes. If I'm so spiritual, why am I still impatient? Why do I still mess up? The mentor laughs softly and says, because you're alive. The goal isn't perfection, it's progress. Even great athletes fall down. The difference is they get up faster, with more awareness. He doesn't measure mastery by never falling, but by how quickly he returns to his center when he does. There's also a kind of joy in mastering himself that chasing external victories never gave him. Winning an argument feels good for an hour. Resisting the urge to humiliate someone and choosing kindness instead can feel good for weeks. Buying something expensive feels exciting for a moment. Walking away from a toxic temptation feels quietly powerful in a way that goes much deeper than excitement. He'll notice that when he starts conquering himself, outside battles often change shape. Conflicts get shorter, regrets get fewer. He apologizes faster, forgives sooner, and sees more clearly. People may even comment, "You're different, calmer, less explosive." They don't see the inner work, the nights of wrestling with old habits. They only see the fruit, someone who doesn't lose himself so easily. A powerful question to carry is, who is ruling me right now? Is it anger, fear, pride, comfort, or awareness? If he can pause in tough moments and ask that honestly, he'll catch many battles before they escalate. Awareness is like turning on the light in a dark room where he's been fighting shadows. Half the fight disappears when he actually sees what's going on. And here's the twist the mentor gives him. Self-mastery isn't only about not doing harmful things. Once he's strong enough to say no to his impulses, a new frontier opens, using that same strength to say a fast, clean yes to what's good. That's where the path leads next. Learning not just to resist the mind's mischief, but to act swiftly and joyfully when kindness, honesty, and courage are calling his name. He didn't notice how often he postponed the good. I'll call my mom later. I'll donate when I make more money. I'll start meditating when life calms down. On paper, he liked kindness, generosity, mindfulness. In practice, his calendar was full of someday. The mentor looks at him with a half smile and says, "You know what the mind loves? The idea of goodness. You know what it hates? Doing it now." Buddha's warning is simple and sharp. If you're slow in doing good, the mind that delights in mischief will trap you. That mischief isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it looks like endless scrolling, pointless gossip, or one more episode when he knows he should be resting. It's that inner voice whispering, "Relax, you'll start tomorrow." And then, somehow, tomorrow keeps missing its flight. He remembers wanting to volunteer at a shelter. Every December, he'd say, "This year I'll go." December came, December went. There was always a reason. Busy at work, tired, wrong timing. One day, years later, he realized he'd spent more time thinking about being a good person than actually being one. That realization wasn't meant to shame him. It was meant to wake him up. The mentor explains that the mind is like a mischievous child in a supermarket. If you don't guide it quickly, it will grab whatever is shiny and sugary. So when a good intention appears, send that message, apologize, help, breathe. It's like a healthy item on the shelf. If he hesitates too long, the mind drags him back to the candy aisle. Distraction, gossip, laziness, old habits that feel more fun in the moment. A practical example. He thinks, "I should text my friend. He seemed off today." If he waits, the moment passes. Later, he tells himself, "He's probably fine. He has other people." But imagine that same friend lying in bed thinking, "Nobody notices when I'm not okay." One quick, sincere message could be the difference between someone feeling invisible and someone feeling seen. Goodness loses power when it lives only in thought. It's not that he has to become a superhero overnight. The point is speed, not size. Small, swift good beats grand. Imaginary good any day. Holding the door, sending a voice note, picking up trash on the sidewalk, actually listening when someone answers, "How are you?" These are not Instagram moments, but they quietly change the atmosphere of the day, for him and for others. He starts to see how delay works, like rust. The longer he waits to apologize, the heavier it feels. The longer he waits to start a habit, the more complicated his excuses become. Now is simple. Later, builds a whole legal case in his head. Why it's hard. Why he's tired. Why it's not the right time. The mentor chuckles. Notice how clever your mind becomes when it's trying to protect an old comfort zone. A useful technique is the 10-second rule. When a wholesome impulse arises, drink water instead of soda, speak kindly instead of sarcastically, get up instead of doom scrolling. He gives himself 10 seconds to move. Not to overthink, not to negotiate, just one small action. Stand up, walk to the sink, open the chat, start the task. Once the body moves, the mind often calms down and follows. Of course, he also needs to avoid swinging to the other extreme, trying to do all the good at once, burning out in a week. Swift goodness isn't frantic, it's steady. It's choosing one or two clear things and doing them regularly. A short daily meditation, a weekly act of generosity, one honest conversation he's been avoiding. Not glamorous, powerful, He remembers a period when he couldn't stop doom-scrolling bad news. Every story made him feel helpless and angry. The mentor suggested a simple trade. For every 15 minutes of news, do 5 minutes of concrete good. Text someone, tip extra, share a useful resource, breathe and send quiet goodwill. Slowly, his nervous system learned a new pattern. When confronted with suffering, act, however small, instead of just consuming. This isn't about perfection points or spiritual medals. He will still procrastinate sometimes. He will still choose the couch over the walk. The difference is awareness. Now, when he delays a good action, he catches the story behind it. I'll do it later. It won't matter. Someone else will. Seeing those stories clearly weakens their power. They stop sounding like truth and start sounding like what they are, excuses. He begins to notice that every time he follows through quickly on a wholesome impulse, his self-respect grows a little. Not ego, not pride. Just that quiet feeling of, I did what my better self wanted. It's the opposite of the shame that comes from ignoring his own conscience. Over days and weeks, these tiny choices build a new identity. Someone who doesn't just like goodness, but lives it. Books on habits often talk about identity-based change. Instead of saying, I'm trying to be kinder, he quietly thinks, I'm someone who acts when kindness calls. That shift matters. The more he sees himself that way, the less time there is for mischief. When his mind suggests something petty or cruel, it clashes with that emerging identity, and he's more likely to say, no, that's not me anymore. He also discovers that swift goodness doesn't always feel good at first. Sometimes it's uncomfortable, admitting he was wrong, choosing honesty instead of a convenient lie, ending a habit that used to numb him. In those moments, he remembers, comfort and goodness are not always the same thing. The sweetness of doing the right thing often shows up after, as relief, as peace, as sleep that comes easier. Over time, he sees a pattern. The more he practices small, fast kindness, the less space there is for the mind's mischief to grow. It's like keeping a garden busy with flowers, so weeds have fewer places to take root. The mischief doesn't vanish forever, but it has less room to run. And in that clearer space, something beautiful begins to emerge. His circle of concern starts expanding beyond his own moods and problems. Because once he learns to move quickly toward good in his own little world, a natural question begins to rise in his heart. What if I lived this way not just for me and the people I like, but for everyone? And that question opens the door to the next deeper step on his path. Understanding what it means to truly see himself in all beings, and to let his goodness reach far beyond the borders of his own life. He used to think compassion was a soft word, the kind people put on Instagram posts with sunset photos. Nice, but not very practical. Then life hit him with a hard situation. Someone hurt him deeply, without apology, without explanation. His first impulse wasn't compassion, it was revenge. Why should I care about their pain, he thought, when they clearly didn't care about mine? The mentor listened and asked calmly, do you want justice, or do you want to stay chained to this person forever? Buddha's line is brutal and beautiful. All beings tremble before violence. All fear death. All love life. When he really lets that sink in, something shifts. The driver who cuts him off in traffic isn't that idiot anymore. He's another nervous system trying not to crash. The grumpy cashier isn't rude staff. She's a tired human with rent, pain, and maybe a sick kid at home. Compassion isn't an excuse. It's a way of seeing more clearly. The mentor gives him a simple thought experiment. Imagine everyone walking around wearing a small screen on their chest, showing their hardest memory: loss, abuse, betrayal, fear. Would you still talk to them the same way? He laughs awkwardly and admits, probably not. That's the point. Right now, he doesn't see those screens, but the pain is still there, hidden behind normal faces and polite small talk. There's a man at his job who annoys everyone, talks over people, never listens, complains constantly. Easy to label him as toxic and avoid him. One day, by accident, he hears part of this man's story. A rough childhood, a father who never praised him, a bankruptcy that wiped out everything. Suddenly, the behavior makes more sense. Not okay, but understandable. Compassion doesn't say, do whatever you want. It says, I see that you're hurt, and I'll set boundaries without hate. A practical exercise the mentor shares is classic loving-kindness meditation. He invites him to sit quietly and repeat. First for himself. May I be safe. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I live with ease. Then for someone he loves. Then for someone neutral, a barista, a neighbor. Then, hardest of all, for someone difficult. Not to approve what they did, but to recognize their basic humanity. At first it feels fake. Over time, it softens something deep. He might think, if I'm compassionate, people will walk all over me. That's the fear. But true compassion always travels with wisdom. Wisdom says, yes, they're hurting. And also, no, I won't let them hurt me again. It's the difference between letting a snake bite you because it's scared and understanding. That snake is scared, but I still need to stay out of its range. You can wish every being well without offering your cheek to every slap. He starts to notice little opportunities for compassion that cost almost nothing. Letting someone with fewer items go ahead in the line. Offering a genuine, how are you? And actually listening to the answer. Sending a message to a friend who went oddly quiet online. These micro moments don't make headlines, but they change the emotional temperature of the room. He feels different too. Less like a separate unit, more like part of a shared field. Sometimes compassion is simply not adding more pain, not forwarding that cruel meme, not joining the gossip, not snapping back when someone is clearly having a worse day than he is. He doesn't have to be a saint. He just has to pause and ask, if I add my reaction to this moment, will there be more suffering or less? That question alone has saved entire evenings. He also remembers he's included in all beings. For years, he tried to be kind to everyone else while being vicious to himself. Idiot, failure, you always mess up. Buddha would say, that's violence too. Self-compassion doesn't mean letting himself off the hook for everything. It means correcting without cruelty. I made a mistake. I'll learn from it. That tone keeps the heart open instead of shattered. Books like The Art of Happiness or Radical Compassion describe people who transformed their whole lives by shifting this one lens, seeing themselves and others as confused and hurting, rather than good or bad. When he adopts that lens, even world news looks different. Instead of humanity is terrible, he sees frightened, conditioned beings, acting from pain and ignorance. It still hurts, but now it's a heartbreak that moves him toward action, not numb despair. Compassion doesn't stay inside his head. Eventually, it wants to use his hands. Maybe he donates. Maybe he volunteers. Maybe he just treats service workers with basic dignity, which sadly is already above average. He realizes he doesn't have to fix the world. He just has to stop contributing to unnecessary suffering in his corner of it. That alone is already a quiet revolution. There will be days when compassion feels impossible, when the wound is too fresh, the betrayal too raw. On those days, the mentor doesn't say, "You must forgive right now." Instead, he suggests a softer line. "May I someday be free from hatred about this." That's still compassion toward himself. He doesn't force his heart open. He just keeps it from hardening permanently around the pain. He might notice that as compassion grows, so does his sense of connection. The illusion of me versus them starts to crumble. The same fears he hides, others hide. The same hopes he carries, others carry. When he holds a door, gives up a seat, or listens without interrupting, he's not being nice in a fake way. He's acknowledging a simple truth. We're in this together, like it or not. This shift also changes how he sees conflict. Instead of, "How do I win?" he starts asking, "How do we suffer less?" That doesn't mean he loses every argument. It means he measures success not by who gets the last word, but by whether the relationship survives and maybe even grows. That's a very different scoreboard, one that often leads to more peace, even if his ego doesn't always get the victory parade. Over time, compassion stops feeling like a heavy duty and starts feeling like a privilege. He begins to notice that whenever he manages to respond from compassion instead of reflex, he sleeps better. There's less to replay, less to regret. He goes to bed with the quiet sense, "I made today a little lighter for at least one being." That's a kind of wealth money can't buy. And here's the interesting part. As his heart opens to more beings, as he starts seeing himself in strangers and even in people who hurt him, a new energy begins to rise. It's not the frantic energy of guilt or pressure. It's a noble kind of drive. The feeling that says, "I want to show up better. I want to move when wisdom calls." That's the next layer of this journey. How to channel this compassionate heart into steady, diligent energy that doesn't burn out or give up halfway. He spent years swinging between two extremes, burnout and paralysis. For a month, he'd be on fire, waking up early, working out, meditating, making plans. Then he'd crash and spend the next month binging series in bed, calling it recharging, but mostly running from life. The mentor watched this cycle quietly and said, "Your problem isn't lack of energy. It's wild, undirected energy that doesn't know when to move and when to rest." Buddha compared diligent effort to a noble horse, swift, responsive, but not frantic. A noble horse doesn't sprint in circles just to look busy. It moves when guided, stops when told, conserves its strength for when it really matters. Most people live like anxious donkeys, jerking forward, stopping abruptly, pulling in random directions, tired all the time, not because they're doing too much, but because they're doing it in a chaotic way. He notices how often his energy goes to things that don't actually matter. Endless arguments in his head, imaginary conversations in the shower, checking his phone just for a second, and waking up 40 minutes later in a random comment section. At the end of the day, he's exhausted, but if you ask, "What did you actually do?" the answer is, not much. That's mischief, not effort. The mentor introduces a simple idea: wholesome energy versus restless energy. Wholesome energy leaves him a little clearer, lighter, more grounded. Restless energy leaves him wired, empty, and strangely more anxious. Exercise, creative work, genuine connection, those often give energy back. Doom scrolling, gossip, overthinking, those eat energy like a black hole. The trick is noticing the difference in his own body, not as theory. He tries a small experiment. For 1 week, he tracks, not perfectly, just roughly, where his energy goes. Work, social media, chores, people, worries, no judgment, just honest observation. The result is uncomfortable. Hours lost in things he doesn't even enjoy. Minutes, maybe seconds, given to what actually matters to him. Suddenly, "I'm tired" sounds less like fate and more like a side effect of misplaced effort. Buddha's teaching about being ardent and swift doesn't mean rushing through life. It means not dragging his feet when he knows the next right step. If he needs to have a difficult conversation, call a doctor, start a habit. His delay only feeds anxiety. Like ripping off a bandage, the longer he stares at it, the bigger it seems. Swift, honest action is often less painful than the days of avoidance that come before it. He remembers a time he ignored his intuition for months. His body kept whispering, "This job is killing you." But he drowned it out with caffeine and Netflix. When he finally faced it, made a plan, and took action, he felt two things at once: fear and relief. The fear was obvious. Change is scary. The relief was the deeper truth. His energy finally had direction again. Not endless rumination, but movement. A practical tool the mentor gives him is the 3 priorities rule. Each day, he chooses just 3 things that truly matter: work tasks, personal actions, or emotional steps like have that conversation. If he completes those, the day is a win, regardless of how many random fires he put out. This stops his energy from being spread across 50 things that never really move forward. There's also the danger of the opposite pattern: forcing spiritual effort, meditating when he's half asleep, reading 10 books at once, signing up for every course because he thinks more is always better. It turns the path into a performance. The mentor reminds him, the point isn't to be the busiest seeker, it's to be the most honest one. Diligent effort is sustainable. It respects limits. It leaves space to breathe. He begins experimenting with what actually fuels his energy. Not in a productivity hack way, but as an act of kindness toward himself. Sleeping enough, drinking water, saying no to things that drain him, spending time with people who uplift rather than constantly complain. It sounds basic, almost boring, but he notices that deep practice, reflection, presence, compassion is nearly impossible when his body is running on fumes. One powerful shift happens when he stops waiting to feel like it. Most of the actions that matter, apologizing, exercising, studying, meditating, don't come pre-packaged with motivation. Waiting for inspiration before moving is like waiting to stop being thirsty before drinking water. The noble horse doesn't ask, "Do I feel like running?" It listens for the signal and responds. He learns to move first, feelings later. Books like The War of Art describe this inner resistance as a force that specifically targets meaningful work. Notice how easy it is to waste 2 hours, and how hard it can feel to start 10 minutes of real practice. That's not laziness. That's resistance. Seeing it as a pattern, not a personal failure, helps him treat it like weather. Predictable, annoying, survivable. Ah, there's the storm again. I can still walk. He also learns to respect seasons. There are times for intense effort and times for gentle maintenance. Trying to be at 110% all year is like whipping the noble horse every minute of every race. Eventually, it collapses. Wisdom knows when to gallop, when to trot, and when to let the horse graze in peace. Diligence isn't a constant sprint. It's consistent, intelligent commitment. Gradually, he notices something beautiful. The more he aligns his energy with what's truly important, the less he feels like life is slipping through his fingers. He still gets tired, of course. He still has lazy days, but overall, there's a new satisfaction. I showed up today, even if only in small ways. That feeling is worth far more than the brief rush from another night of escaping into distraction. And yet, even with all this effort, another trap lies ahead. The temptation to confuse knowledge with progress. He can pour energy into reading every book, listening to every podcast, and collecting spiritual quotes, and still remain stuck in the same patterns. That's where the journey turns again, toward understanding why information alone isn't enough, and how wisdom, real, lived wisdom, requires a very different kind of engagement. He always felt proud of how much he knew. Facts, quotes, theories, names of books he hadn't actually finished. His mind was a crowded bookshelf. At parties, people said, "Wow, you're so smart," and his chest quietly expanded. But when life punched him, heartbreak, anxiety, grief, that same bookshelf didn't help much. The mentor watched this quietly and said, "You're like an ox that keeps getting bigger but never wiser. Strong back, empty compass." It stings, but he gets the picture. The ox in Buddha's image grows in size, not in understanding. That's him with his podcasts and saved threads, collecting information like someone who collects gym equipment and never trains. The treadmill looks great in the corner, but his heart still races, going up one flight of stairs. Knowledge decorates the mind. Wisdom strengthens the soul. The mentor uses a simple analogy: a menu versus a meal. He can memorize every dish in a restaurant, recite the ingredients, quote reviews. But if he never actually eats, his body stays hungry. Knowledge is the menu. Important. Yes, but wisdom is digestion. It's what happens when he actually lives the teaching, chews it, wrestles with it, absorbs it, and lets it change him from the inside out. He remembers a time he quoted a book about relationships while totally ignoring his own emotional mess. He could explain attachment styles but couldn't apologize when he was wrong. He could analyze trauma theoretically but refused to go to therapy. That's the trap. Ideas so sharp they cut through everything, except his own ego. The mentor grins. "Your intellect is brilliant. Now let's invite your heart to catch up." There's also a subtle addiction to collecting concepts. One more course, one more video, one more thread on trauma, one more Buddhist quote saved on his phone. It feels like progress, but often it's just elegant procrastination. As long as he's studying, he doesn't have to actually change. Wisdom, on the other hand, demands something uncomfortable. Action, real conversations, real boundaries, real choices. He starts paying attention to how he uses spiritual ideas. Sometimes he notices himself hiding behind them, saying, "Everything happens for a reason," when someone needs real empathy. Saying, "I'm working on myself," instead of just admitting, "I screwed up and I'm sorry." Good teachings in the wrong hands become armor. Wisdom is when he uses truth to open, not to escape. Books like The Power of Now or When Things Fall Apart can be powerful, but only if he lets them interrogate his life. He notices the difference between reading a chapter and asking, "Okay, where is this happening in me?" versus just nodding along like he's watching a motivational reel. Wisdom is the moment he closes the book and actually does the uncomfortable thing it pointed to. The mentor suggests a brutal but honest practice. For every hour of theory, do at least 10 minutes of application. If he reads about mindfulness, he sits and observes his breath. If he consumes content about communication, he risks one vulnerable conversation. If he studies compassion, he chooses one person to treat more gently. Knowledge fills notebooks. Wisdom changes behavior. He begins to notice that truly wise people rarely flex how much they know. They talk simply, they ask questions, they admit when they're unsure. There's a softness in their certainty, like someone who's tested truths in fire, not just in debates. Around them, he doesn't feel impressed. He feels safe. That's how wisdom reveals itself. Not in fancy sentences, but in the quality of presence. He thinks of someone he once admired for their intellect. Sharp, fast, ruthless in arguments. Over time, he saw the cost: broken friendships, constant tension, secret loneliness. Then he met an older man who spoke less but listened deeply. Same level of intelligence, completely different outcome. One used knowledge as a sword, the other used wisdom as a lantern. Sometimes, he realizes, he clings to knowledge because it feels safer than feeling. It's easier to analyze why people suffer than to sit with his own pain in silence. Easier to quote Buddha on impermanence than to let a relationship actually end without clinging. Ideas become a shield, but a shield that blocks arrows also blocks hugs. Wisdom takes the shield down and says, "Okay, I'm ready to really live this." A small exercise helps him see where he's stuck. He writes down 3 teachings he believes in, like everything is impermanent, or forgiveness heals, or mindfulness matters. Under each, he writes one line: "If I truly lived this, what would I do differently this week?" The gap between his answer and his reality. That's the distance between knowledge and wisdom in his life. He notices that the people who changed him most didn't just talk differently, they lived differently. A calm friend in a crisis. A parent who apologized instead of pretending they were always right. A coworker who admitted fear and acted anyway. Their lives were sermons without needing a stage. Wisdom is audible in silence, visible in choices, and contagious without marketing. This realization humbles him. It's strangely relieving to admit, I don't need to know everything. I just need to deeply live a few essential truths. Better to embody one teaching than collect 50. Better to fully practice "don't speak when angry" than quote 10 pages about emotional regulation while still exploding at every inconvenience. Little by little, he starts valuing practice over performance. He'd rather learn slowly and deeply than quickly and superficially. He'd rather be the person who reads one book and changes their life than the person who reads 50 and changes nothing. When he catches himself bragging about what he's studying, he gently redirects. Okay, but what am I doing with this? And yet, even as he embraces this shift, another uncomfortable insight waits for him. It's one thing to see the gap between knowledge and wisdom. It's another thing to see the gap between what he knows about others and what he knows about himself. To truly walk this path, he'll have to turn that clear gaze inward, not to shame himself, but to straighten his own life before trying to fix the crookedness around him. He always found it easier to diagnose other people's problems. He could spot his friend's toxic relationship from a mile away, list his cousin's financial mistakes like a spreadsheet, and give sharp advice to coworkers about boundaries. But when the mentor gently asked, "Okay, and where are you out of alignment?" he suddenly had to look somewhere he'd been avoiding: the mirror. It's funny how clearly we see through other people's windows while our own glass is covered in dust. Buddha's teaching hits like a clean punch. To straighten what's crooked around you, you must first do the harder thing: straighten yourself. That sounds noble until he realizes what it actually means. It means admitting, My anger is my responsibility. My patterns are my responsibility. My repeated mistakes aren't just bad luck. They're clues. It's much more comfortable to stay busy fixing others. It feels powerful. Looking within feels vulnerable. He starts noticing how often his criticism of others is a disguised reflection. The people he calls lazy trigger his own fear of not doing enough. The ones he calls selfish mirror the parts of him that secretly always want to be first. It's not that others don't have flaws, they do, but the intensity of his reaction often reveals a hidden twin inside him. The mentor suggests, whenever someone irritates you, ask, what part of me recognizes this so quickly? One day he complains, my friends never listen. They're always distracted. The mentor smiles and says, tell me honestly, when was the last time you listened without checking your phone or planning your reply? He thinks back and winces. He's been doing the same thing, just more subtly. This is the uncomfortable magic of self-honesty. It burns a little, but it clears the air. A practical exercise helps. Anytime he wants to rant about someone, he pauses and runs a quick scan. Where do I do a similar version of this? If he wants to complain, they never apologize. He checks. When was the last time I apologized quickly and cleanly? If he thinks, they're always dramatic. He asks, where do I create extra drama in my own head? It doesn't excuse others, but it stops him from living like a walking spotlight that never turns inward. He realizes that trying to fix others without working on himself is like trying to straighten a picture on the wall while the floor beneath it is tilted. He might get it right for a moment, but everything is warped by the foundation. His tone, his energy, his unresolved pain will leak through even his best advice. People feel that. Kids feel it. Partners feel it. Friends feel when guidance comes from ego instead of humility. There's a big difference between saying, you should be calmer, and saying, I noticed I used to react the same way you're reacting now. Here's what helped me. The second version only exists when he's actually done the inner work. You can't share a path you've never walked. You can't lend peace you don't have. Straightening himself first gives his words weight without needing to shout. He starts to see how much energy he's wasted trying to reform others, trying to make a partner communicate perfectly, trying to get a relative to finally understand, trying to force a co-worker to be more mature. That game is a rigged machine. The more he pushes, the more they resist. When he pulls that energy back and says, what can I clean up right now? Something surprising happens. Tension often drops on both sides. One concrete practice is journaling with ruthless kindness. Not, I'm trash, but, okay, where am I lying to myself? Where am I pretending I'm fine when I'm not? Where am I blaming circumstances for what's really my fear of change? He writes not to beat himself up, but to stop running. Just admitting, I'm scared, or I'm jealous, or I'm avoiding this, straightens more than a dozen lectures to other people ever could. There's a quiet dignity that appears when he takes responsibility for his own crookedness. He stops playing the victim in every story. Yes, people have hurt him. Yes, life has been unfair at times. But he starts asking, and what am I doing now? That shift from, look what they did, to, here's how I'm choosing to respond, is the exact moment his spine, internally, starts to straighten. He'll fail at this, of course. Some days he'll go right back to pointing fingers, listing everyone else's faults, acting like the only sane person in a world of lunatics. When he catches himself, he doesn't need to spiral into shame. He can simply say, ah, there I go again, trying to fix the mirror by punching my reflection. Then he returns to the only territory he truly controls: his own thoughts, words, and actions. He begins to notice that the more he cleans up his side, the less he needs others to change for him to be okay. Does he still prefer when they act kindly? Of course, but his emotional stability is no longer entirely hinged on their behavior. That's a massive upgrade in freedom. His peace stops being a hostage negotiation and becomes a personal practice. Interestingly, as he works on himself, some relationships shift without him saying a word. People respond differently to the version of him who owns his part, apologizes quickly, and doesn't escalate every conflict. The same comment that used to trigger a full war now lands in someone who knows how to breathe, name his feeling, and choose a response. He's still human. He still reacts sometimes, but the baseline is different. Books like Radical Honesty or The Four Agreements highlight the same theme. Almost everything gets better when he stops lying, to others and to himself. I'm fine when he's not. It's all their fault when he knows that's not fully true. I don't care when he cares enough to lose sleep. Straightening himself is less about becoming perfect and more about becoming honest. There's also a certain relief in letting go of the fantasy that he's responsible for saving everyone. He's not their therapist, guru, or personal Buddha. He's just one human cleaning his own room, one habit at a time. If others are inspired by that, great. If not, he's still doing the work he was meant to do, becoming less harmful, more awake, more aligned with what he knows is right. And in that quiet, ongoing work of straightening his own life, another truth slowly reveals itself. Once he sees that purity and impurity rise from within his own choices, it becomes impossible to keep blaming the world for everything he feels. That realization is both terrifying and incredibly powerful, and it's exactly where the next piece of his journey is waiting. He used to wear "I don't need anyone" like a badge of honor: independent, self-sufficient, lone wolf. It sounded powerful on Instagram quotes, but in real life, it mostly meant he hurt in silence and pretended he was fine. The mentor smiled one day and said, "If isolation really worked, your mind would be at peace by now, wouldn't it?" That question landed harder than any motivational speech. Buddha placed Sangha, community, right beside the Buddha and the Dharma as one of the three jewels. That's not poetic decoration, it's practical psychology. The mind is tricky. Alone, it can convince him that his worst thoughts are facts, his fears are prophecies, and his shame is unique. Then he hears someone else describe the same struggle and suddenly realizes, wait, I'm not broken, I'm human. He notices this every time he has a real conversation, not small talk. A friend shares, "I also spiral at night. I also overthink for hours." Instantly, the weight drops a little. The problem didn't disappear, but the loneliness around it did. That loneliness, more than the pain itself, is what crushes people. Sangha doesn't magically fix minds. It reminds each person, you're not the only one wrestling with yours. The mentor explains that everyone needs three kinds of people on this path: someone a few steps ahead, someone walking beside, and someone a bit behind. The one ahead shows what's possible. The one beside makes the journey less lonely. The one behind reminds him how far he's already come. Without these, he's trapped in his own echo chamber, recycling the same beliefs and calling it reality. In a modern world, Sangha doesn't have to look like a monastery. It can be a weekly online meditation group, a WhatsApp chat with two friends committed to mindfulness, or even a mental health lunch at work where people drop the professional mask for half an hour. The form doesn't matter as much as the function, a space where truth is more valuable than image. He remembers joining a small online group where everyone shared one honest thing each week. A fear, a small win, a slip-up. At first, he kept it safe. I meditated twice. Then one week he said, I had a panic attack in the bathroom at work. Silence. Then someone replied, Me too, last month. Another said, I thought I was the only one. That moment did more for his healing than 100 hours of pretending. Of course, not every group is Sangha. Some spaces are just complaint clubs disguised as support. He learns to notice the difference. True Sangha leaves him a little more honest, a little more responsible, and a little more hopeful. Fake Sangha feeds his victim mentality, keeps him stuck in blame, and quietly glorifies suffering. If he regularly leaves a support group, feeling worse and more hopeless, that's data. A simple way to start building modern Sangha is to initiate one brave conversation. He chooses one person he trusts and says something real. Hey, I've been dealing with anxiety. Would you be open to checking in once a week? It's vulnerable. They might say no, but surprisingly often, people are relieved. I've been needing that too. Everyone's waiting for someone to go first. Books and podcasts become part of his extended Sangha too. He doesn't worship authors, but he lets their experience mentor him. A therapist on YouTube sharing about panic. A Buddhist nun talking about grief. A mindfulness teacher guiding meditation at Trihai Trifuru. Him. These voices don't know his name, but they still sit with him in the dark nights when no one else is awake. He also learns that Sangha is not just who supports him, but who he chooses not to let shape his mind. If his group is constantly cynical, mocking inner work, talking only about drama and consumption, that's Sangha too, just one that trains his nervous system in the opposite direction of peace. Sometimes, the most spiritual move he can make is stepping away from a crowd that keeps him asleep. The mentor invites him to be deliberate. Curate your influences like you curate your feed. One mindful friend, one wise book, one honest group chat can shift his mental climate more than he imagines. Over time, he realizes something beautiful. His presence becomes medicine for others too. He's not just a receiver. He's part of the healing field now, showing up, listening, staying kind when it would be easier to disappear. There's also the internal Sangha, the different parts of him that finally stop fighting and start collaborating. The scared child, the tired adult, the wise observer. When he meets them all with some compassion, he stops feeling like a battlefield and more like a small, strange community learning to live together. Therapy, journaling, meditation all help these inner voices talk instead of scream. Is Sangha messy? Always. People project, misunderstand, disappoint. But practicing these teachings inside a community is exactly what makes them real. It's easy to be patient alone in your room. The practice becomes real when someone interrupts you, disagrees with you, or forgets you. That's where the muscles of mindfulness, compassion, and equanimity are actually trained. Slowly, he goes from, I don't need anyone, to, I'm responsible for who I walk with. That's different. He doesn't cling desperately to people, but he also doesn't pretend he's above needing support. He understands what Buddha knew. The mind is too complex to untangle entirely in solitary confinement. We heal in mirrors, in conversations, in shared silence, in me too. And once he recognizes the power of Sangha, a new question emerges naturally. How can he bring this same sense of support and clarity into his daily structure? Not just in conversations, but in the way his days are designed. Because community is powerful, yes, but the rhythm of his everyday life is where these teachings either take root or quietly fade away. He used to think a spiritual life meant dramatic retreats, long meditations, or moving to a temple somewhere green and quiet. Meanwhile, his real life looked like everyone else's: alarms, messages, deadlines, dishes, no mountain, no monastery, just noise. The mentor smiles and says, "Good, that's exactly where the practice belongs, inside the ordinary, not outside of it." The idea that changes everything is simple. Don't rely on motivation. Rely on systems. Motivation is like weather, nice when it shows up, completely unreliable. Systems are like plumbing. Not sexy, but they keep things flowing. Instead of promising, "I'll meditate for an hour every day," he builds a tiny rule. After I brush my teeth in the morning, I sit still for 3 minutes. That's a system. He starts looking for anchors, things he already does daily without fail: brushing teeth, making coffee, locking the door, picking up his phone. If he attaches micro-practices to those anchors, mindfulness stops being a separate activity and becomes woven into his existing life. One conscious breath before unlocking the phone. One moment of gratitude while the coffee brews. One body scan when he lies down at night. A practical example. He turns his commute into a built-in meditation. If he drives, the first 5 minutes are in silence. No music, no podcast, just feeling his hands on the wheel, the seat under his body, the breath moving. If he takes a bus or train, he uses one station or a certain number of stops to simply notice thoughts and sounds. No lotus position required, just presence inside the movement. He designs a soft start morning instead of launching straight into digital chaos. Before opening messages, he chooses a small routine. Drink water mindfully, stretch for 2 minutes, or write one line in a notebook. Today, I want to feel more bodhidharma. It's not about perfection. Some mornings he forgets, but when he remembers, the entire day feels 5% less random, and 5% matters a lot over time. At work, he creates invisible rituals. Every time he closes an email, he takes one conscious breath before opening the next. Before entering a meeting, he pauses at the door. May I be present. May I listen more than I speak. These tiny phrases don't take time. They change the quality of the time that was already going to happen. The job stays the same. His mind doesn't. The mentor introduces him to the idea of mindful friction. He makes unhelpful habits slightly harder, and helpful habits slightly easier. Junk apps move to the last page of his phone. Meditation and journaling apps go to the front. Snacks he tends to binge on go to a high shelf. Fruit sits in a bowl on the table. He's not relying on willpower alone. He's shaping the path his mind and body naturally walk. He also chooses 3 core teachings from the whole video to build around. No more. Maybe watch your thoughts. Speak less but truer. And do small good quickly. For each one, he creates a simple daily cue. For thoughts, a sticky note on his monitor that says, "Who's talking in my head right now?" For speech, a reminder on his phone, "Is this kind, true, useful, timely?" For swift goodness, a nightly question, "What small good did I do today?" Evening becomes repair time, not just collapse time. Yes, he still watches shows or scrolls sometimes. But before that, he inserts a tiny review. 5 minutes of asking, "Where did I live awake today? Where did I go back to autopilot? No shame, just data. This turns bad days into teachers instead of evidence that he's failing. The day didn't go how he wanted? Fine. Another chance tomorrow. With slightly better information, he learns to use tech as a tool rather than an enemy. A simple meditation playlist, a focus mode that blocks certain apps for an hour, a timer that rings every 60 minutes so he can stretch and breathe. The same phone that once hijacked his nervous system now becomes part of his practice. The difference isn't the device, it's the intention behind how he uses it. On harder days, when his mind is noisy and his heart is heavy, he lowers the bar instead of quitting altogether. Can't do 10 minutes? Do one? Can't sit? Walk slowly from the bedroom to the kitchen, really feeling each step. The secret isn't intensity, it's continuity. Even a tiny flame that never goes out will eventually light up a whole room. Books like Atomic Habits and Buddhist texts quietly agree on one thing. Repeated small actions, aligned with clear intention, reshape a life. He doesn't need a personality transplant. He needs tiny, consistent moves in the same direction. Over weeks, these small shifts compound. He catches himself snapping less, breathing more, noticing sooner when his mind is spiraling. He also remembers to leave room for joy. Mindfulness isn't supposed to turn him into a serious statue. He can design joy moments into his day. One song he always dances to while making dinner, one meme he sends to a friend, one thing he genuinely savors instead of consuming mindlessly. A cup of tea, sunlight on the floor, a few pages from a good book. Relaxation and play are part of mental health, not a distraction from it. Gradually, his life begins to feel less like a storm he's surviving and more like a garden he's tending. Some days weeds win, some days flowers do, but there's direction, there's care. There are systems that catch him when motivation disappears. And as his days become more intentionally designed, something subtle but powerful happens. The teachings stop being content he heard once and start becoming the way he actually moves through the world. And in that redesigned daily rhythm, with community beside him and small systems quietly working in his favor, the final truth of the path comes into focus. All of this only matters if he keeps choosing it, breath after breath, day after day. Because the real transformation doesn't happen in the video, or in the book, or in the script. It happens in the next ordinary moment where he decides, once again, to be awake. Oh, ChatGPT dis. If you've come this far, it's not by accident. Something in you is tired of living on autopilot. Tired of waking up already overwhelmed. Tired of feeling like your mind is a wild animal dragging you through the day. These 53 teachings were never meant to be pretty, phrases you forget tomorrow. They're invitations, maps, keys. But the door still has to be opened from the inside, by you. So let me ask you, honestly, which part of your life is screaming the loudest right now? Is it your anxiety, your anger, your relationships, your lack of peace with yourself? Don't try to fix everything at once. That's just another trick of the mind to keep you paralyzed. Choose one teaching that hit you hard. One sentence, one story, one image. Write it down. Put it on your wall, on your phone, on your bathroom mirror, and live that teaching for the next 7 days. What would change if, instead of starting your morning in your notifications, you started with 3 conscious breaths and 1 tiny act of goodness? If, instead of believing every thought, you watched it like a cloud? If, instead of punishing yourself, you spoke to your own heart the way you'd speak to a friend who's hurting. Your life doesn't transform because you heard a lot of wisdom once. It transforms because you dared to apply a little wisdom many times. You don't need to become a monk. You don't need to move to a cave in the Himalayas. Your practice is right here, in traffic, at work, washing dishes, answering messages, dealing with people who test your patience. Buddha didn't teach for perfect people living perfect lives. He taught for humans exactly like you, messy, emotional, inconsistent, and still absolutely capable of awakening one small choice at a time. So here's your challenge. What is one concrete action you'll take today because of what you heard? Will you sit in silence for 5 minutes? Will you send that honest message? Will you forgive yourself for something you've been carrying for years? Or at least start forgiving? Don't just nod and move on. Decide. Say it out loud if you can. Commit to your next tiny step on this path. And if you felt even a little lighter, a little clearer, or a little more understood while walking through these teachings with me, don't disappear. Hit subscribe, turn on the notifications, and stay close. This channel exists so you don't have to walk this path alone. In the next video on your screen, we'll go even deeper into quieting the mind and healing the night. So when the world goes silent, your thoughts don't have to scream. Now it's your turn. What teaching touched you the most? What pattern are you finally ready to release? And who do you know that needs to hear this today? Tell me in the comments, subscribe, and activate the bell so we can keep exploring this journey together. One mindful breath, one honest insight, one brave step at a time.